It's Query and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
What a day. What a day, because and Eddie was so consumed by it. I talked to Eddie last night. That's not common, but rarity last night. Eddie called and I answered. He was watching Landman for the first time. Maybe he binge watched it till like 4 a.m. and that's why he's off today. But I think in reality, and I know Eddie said that he had just some, we all get it, right? Stuff that piles up and you need to take a day and get stuff done around the house, etc. I get it. And Eddie's dog needs to go to the dog doctor. I get it. Fortunately, not life-threatening, I don't believe, but I get it. But I think Eddie isn't here today because he knows that it's the celebratory red numeral date of the Peter Brady visit at 2 o'clock today. And I think Eddie just wanted to make sure that he was locked in at home, popcorn in hand, to just sit back and chill and listen to the greatness that is Peter Brady coming on the radio. Obviously, Christopher Knight, his real name, which is going to happen at 2 o'clock today. And it's a glorious day. I'm on my way tomorrow to Long Beach. I love going to Long Beach. I love it. There are maybe 3 places matter of fact, there are 3 places in the United States that from the time that I very first arrived, I was like, did I live here before? I just know I feel perfectly comfortable and I feel like I know where everything is. And I've never been here before. But yet, like, somebody asked me directions, something. I'm like, yeah, you just need to go up here and go to the right. And I'm like, what in the world? And Long Beach is kind of one of those. It just feels, I love everything about it. I love going there. The weather is exactly like as it looks today. It's always sunny there. It's 72 and breezy. It's beautiful. There's a vibe. There's an energy. I love everything about it. And I'm leaving for Long Beach tomorrow. So like Eddie today, I'll be off tomorrow. I believe Greg Rakestraw is filling in. But there's a lot to get to and a lot to discuss. And I'll begin with this. I'm a cynic. I know I'm a cynic. And my cynicism and professionalism both are simultaneously being tested. Tested's maybe the wrong word. Challenged. A synonym of tested, which would also make it a wrong word. But the professionalism in me says that I have to be objective and that I don't show bias or lean in on one team if, in fact, the vast majority of the listening audience or a certain percentage of the listening audience would feel otherwise. Growing up in this industry, growing up dreaming of being in this industry, being around it from the time that I was in the 6th grade. And I am the first to admit, I am not in this seat and not in this position, and you're not hearing my voice based on any skill set whatsoever, simply because of a ton of fortune that came my way in a combination of getting to know or serendipitously being introduced to the right people and hanging around long enough that opportunity eventually opened up. And then hanging around long enough that you have experience to be able to talk about things. I get it. And with that experience and with that observation at a very young age, and this isn't really the case now. It's not really applicable today. Not in a bad way. It just isn't. But back in my day, it used to be that if you were going to be somebody who opined on sports or covered sports or wore a credential, that you did so coming from a baseline of objectivity with no rooting interest or bias to cloud your opinion. So that you see things with a clarity that even a fan doesn't, and therefore the fan who is so enraged over whether or not something was a bad call at the end of a game can say, maybe it wasn't a bad call. Let me ask the one person who's objective about it and see their opinion. And that's what your duty, if you're wearing that credential, was to be. So it is ingrained in you that you are not to be a fan. I know the name of the radio station is The Fan, but that means all of you. This is the radio station of the fan. And we try to represent that enthusiasm, notably, for example, last year. It was exactly probably 11 months ago when I came on the radio and I said, here's the bottom line. I have to shelf my professionalism, and I ask for your forgiveness in doing so, because forever I have gone to games in neutrality with objectivity. And I never allowed myself, because I was wearing a credential, to have a rooting interest so that it wouldn't cloud my perception and my deciphering of a game. And when the Pacers went on that run a year ago, I came out and said, the Pacers were a team where I was a ball boy as a young teenager, a team that I watched on Friday nights when they didn't win a lot of games, a team that I went out and bought the buttons to put on my denim jacket to say that I was a Pacer fan, and a team that is basically family to the most important person in my world. So, yes, I asked for your forgiveness in that. But most people in Indianapolis are Pacer fans. There's only one team. And the same would be said for the Colts. There's only one team. When it comes to Indiana and Purdue, I am smart enough to know that if I talk positively about Indiana, I'm offending 40% of my listener base. And if I talk positively about Purdue, I'm offending 60% of my listener base. I get it. So I have to speak to both of those with a relative objectivity. I can mention where I have a great respect for Purdue basketball or a great respect for what Indiana did in football. And I get it. I can relate to and I understand from both sides what Zach Edey's run to the Final Four meant, and I can understand what it meant when Fernando Mendoza led Indiana to an unbeaten season. And so, therefore, I'm to be objective. But forgive me if, to me, from a personal standpoint, I am thrilled for Indiana basketball. And I apologize to Purdue fans. But forgive me for the fact that I'm thrilled for Indiana basketball for two reasons. Number one, because I do think Darren DeVries is a good coach. Is he an elite coach? I don't know. Is his floor Dr. Tom Davis's tenure at Iowa? Maybe. Is his ceiling the next Danny Hurley? I guess possibly, but probably not. But either way, I think he's a good coach. I've talked to people that have gone down and seen practices that say that they run very efficient practice, that they are very defensive-minded, and I like the fact, and I do think that this is a sign of good coaching. I like the fact that last year when I watched Indiana, and I went to the first game of the year, and I watched them over the course of the year, I never saw any reason to believe there was any discourse amongst that roster. And when you put together a roster of all new faces that are all coming in for different reasons with different amount of life still in them in their career, and you put together a team like that, and yet they seem to, and yes, they weren't the most talented group in the country, but they certainly seemed to get along with one another and understand what the common goal was and how to get there. Now, were they a better team at the end of the year than at the beginning of the year? Probably not. However, I think we also saw by the end of the year, the thing that we overlook about Indiana basketball from a year ago is you had players getting significant minutes who either A, had not necessarily gotten those kinds of minutes and those situations before, or B, were just coming from smaller schools. And quite frankly, they kind of ran out of gas, and you could see it. You could see why a guy at Elon suddenly was at Elon and not playing in the Big Ten. But Indiana had to put together that team later in the year, right? And so, therefore, they had to make do with what they had. And so I think DeVries is a good coach. And by all account, from what I hear, he seems like a nice guy. But I'm also personally happy because of the fact that Ryan Carr left the Pacers to go work for Indiana, and everybody here knows that Ryan and I have been really good friends back to our college days. Matter of fact, in college, I probably spent more time with Ryan Carr in Bloomington than any other person during the time that I was in school. I would say that's a fair statement. Now, Ryan was doing basketball managing stuff, so he had other stuff going on, but we were neighbors/roommates. We were basically Jerry and Kramer. And so spent a lot of time around him. So for Ryan Carr, I'm thrilled. Personally, I'm happy for Indiana for that. But then there's the cynicism in me. There's the cynicism in me because of the fact that, yes, they got Aiden Sherrill from Alabama. A big that can protect the rim, that can even step out and shoot a three, and is going to control the low block. And they got guards. They got lots of them. Marcus Burton, high scorer out of Notre Dame. Good competition. This isn't somebody that was a high scorer at a low, ACC competition, right? 21 a game. Flat out can score. They obviously got the big out of SMU. I believe we said this yesterday. Do you want to try it? Nathaniel, don't call me Atticus Finch.
Samet Yigatoglu.
I believe the Y is silent. It's Igatoglu, right? Samet Igatoglu from Southern Methodist, 7'2", Turkish descent. But I mentioned yesterday, really good low post presence, works well with guards. I haven't sat there and watched a bunch of SMU games, but I called people who covered SMU. Good player, not a step-out shooter. But you now kind of take care of that because you have him working side by side, and that allows for Sherrill to move around a little bit. And then we talked about the other. They have five-person class right now in the portal. And I'm happy for Indiana personally. But the little devil on the other shoulder is that cynic in me. That cynic in me that says, hasn't Indiana had the number one transfer portal before? That cynic in me that says, wasn't Christian Lander supposed to be the best point guard in the country, and that's why he reclassified to get to Indiana early because he was going to be one and done to go to the NBA, when in actuality he was like two and done before he went to Western Kentucky? The cynicism in me that says, I was there at an Indiana practice when Andre Patterson pulled down his first rebound out of a rebound machine, and one of the coaches said, you got to rebound harder than that, but think about me when you got your first $10 million. Because he was a surefire lottery level pick. Had a great game against Duke. The cynicism to me that was doing backflips because Charlie Miller scored close to 4,000 points in high school and then was completely bewildered over where he lost his jump shot that fell out of a U-Haul truck somewhere around Chattanooga on the drive to Bloomington. Because he had an unbelievable dunk off the baseline against Purdue and is a wonderful guy. I knew him a little bit in college, a great guy. But he was he was a good college player, don't get me wrong, but not what you thought it was going to be. We do this so often. We do it so often, and we so often overhype it, oversell it, overthink it, and then it doesn't work out. So I beg to the Indiana fan base, proceed with caution. Allow it to organically play out. And with each and every move that's been announced, and Indiana, I know that Indiana fans can sit here and say, see, Indiana's killing it. They're getting all the transfers, and I don't see Purdue or UConn getting any of them. Or Purdue or UConn don't need them. I don't mean they don't need great players. I mean, they have great players. They have their own roster. Indiana was in a unique situation because you had to completely flip and overhaul your roster. And therefore, the reason they're going to have more transfers than anyone. But the other thing that comes into play with all of it, so you have to be cautiously optimistic. And you have to give it time to simmer a little bit. Indiana basketball should be, I'm not saying it is, but Indiana basketball should be a crock-pot dinner. And forever, Indiana fans have wanted to make it a microwave dinner. Sometimes you got to step back and say, you know what? I know that we always want immediate results, and we want immediate consumption. But at some point, you have to step back and say, you know, a crock-pot meal is pretty darn good, but you got to let it simmer for quite some time before it's perfectly ready to go. And with Indiana, the time has come And last year was their gap year. Last year was their Tyrese Halliburton is hurt year. Purdue, look at Purdue. When Matt Painter took over for Gene Cady, it would have been easy for Purdue to just assume that it was going to be a microwave dinner. Let's get results now. And yet Matt Painter had to kind of, at no disrespect to Gene Cady, I don't mean it that way, but it became more difficult to recruit, as nothing against Gene Cady, as it is for any coach when it is very apparent that coach is entering into the last handful of years of their tenure. You can absolutely bet that when other schools are recruiting players that are in the running for Purdue, that those players are being told, well, Gene Cady's not going to be here more than 3 years. He's gone after your sophomore year. This was in the old era, of course, when guys actually thought about 4 years. And so it became more difficult for Purdue to recruit due to that uncertainty. Then you bring in Painter, you have that transition, but you had to kind of start over because of what had become and stalled out a little bit in their basketball program. And they didn't go for the microwave dinner. When Painter's team struggled early, they went to the Crock-pot and said, we're going to let this simmer. And they have added better ingredients with each and every year. And the time has finally come for Indiana to do that, which is why the thing that is key for the players that Indiana has gone out and gotten in the portal, they are players that are not exclusively fifth and sixth year graduate players that have a year left. These are players that you get, and yes, you're still going to have turnover. You're still going to have the transfer portal in play. But these are players that allow Indiana to let it simmer a little bit and start to create an identity that then allows you to recruit beyond just every year having to recycle it. And so the cynic in me says, yeah, they put together a roster, great, it's Indiana. Maybe this one can actually beat Northwestern and they'll get into the NCAA tournament and go to Dayton. That's the cynic in me. The realist in me and the objective in me says you have to let it simmer, and it seems like they're going through the proper steps to do exactly that. And the personal side of me says, knowing Ryan Carr and how much Indiana basketball means to him, and trusting Ryan Carr when he tells me how much he likes Darren DeVries, because he knows Darren DeVries and I don't, but I know Ryan really well and I know his character, that lends me to say those are people that I want to root for. Those are people that I know are putting their heart and soul into doing everything they can to get this in the right direction and doing it within the boundaries, if there are boundaries today, of what is the method in which they should do it. And I say the same for Purdue. I want to see Matt Painter win a national title. I want to see Elliott Bloom deliver for Purdue the same way that I want. And I've known Elliott a long time too. Not like Ryan Carr, but I've known him a long time. I want to see those guys do well. And so those that have asked me, what do you think about Indiana's portal? There's my answer. My long answer is they had to upgrade their roster because they needed players. But they have gone out this time, now that they've had more time, they've been able to go out and scout players that they think will mesh well together. And I would imagine that some of these are players that you may look at and say, that guy doesn't seem to make sense. But they're building a team, and Ryan Carr has witnessed this. Ryan Carr has worked underneath and sat in the corner with notes and watched Larry Bird put teams together and watched Kevin Pritchard put teams together and listened when Donnie Walsh consulted Larry Bird and Kevin Pritchard and watched as Rick Carlisle figured out which buttons to push on certain players and also what players would be good acquisitions for a roster that don't necessarily seem at the time to be noteworthy, but it's about how they feed off of another player or how they mesh in with another player. And that's what you have happening right now in Indiana. And then the cynic in me on the other side of it says, you got to let it play out because I've seen – remember the movement? Dare I tell everybody about the movement? The movement was going to change everything. Print the T-shirts. We're back, baby. The movement. And the only movement that took place was, other than Yogi Ferrell, everybody moving right back out of Bloomington. Grand opening, grand closing. There goes the movement. There was one kind of movement, but it wasn't the kind of movement you wanted to see out of the movement at Indiana. And not only that, but there's another layer to this with Indiana that provides the backstory that I think people would be surprised to hear. Because it doesn't add up the way a lot of people think it does. In this renaissance of Indiana athletics. And Purdue fans, I hear you. I get it. Why is this guy talking about Indiana? We are Purdue. We're the ones that have most recently been to a Sweet 16. We're the ones that most recently have been to an Elite Eight. We're the ones that have most recently been to a Final Four. We're the ones that have most recently been to the championship game. We're the ones most recently to win the Big Ten championship. I get all that. And Purdue actually is a victim to an extent of their own success, of the fact that talking about Purdue in a favorable fashion, everyone knows that. Everyone knows how good they are. But there's something taking place with Bloomington that I think a lot of people there's an assumption that is inaccurate. And I'll get into that about 10 minutes from now. Nathaniel, don't call me Atticus Finch, is in today for Eddie. Eddie, as I said, is, he mentioned the dog's got to go to the doggy dock and then other such things to do. I get it, especially coming off the NBA season where Eddie is the producer for the Pacers radio network, so that means plenty of time in here, so things stack up. Nathaniel, you did not bring in today. You failed in your one delivery assignment. There are no requests that I have of you specifically, but there was one that I thought was implied. My understanding is you tried to deliver the other day. You couldn't do so. A for effort, but F today on delivery.
I tried. What more do you want from me? It's not my fault. I went and knocked on the door, and the door was closed and locked. What do you want from me?
Wait, there was a sign on the door, right?
Yeah.
And the sign on the door said what date the door would then be unlocked, right?
Potentially, yeah.
What was the date on that sign?
This week.
Okay. Did you go back and check?
No, it's 45 minutes the opposite way.
Okay, well, I mean, the show doesn't start till noon. As long as you were pulling out of there by 11:14, you were good. Do you not know the jQuery calendar?
That's right.
I mean, come on. Now, having said that, those that are listening and are saying, what exactly is it that they're talking about? I take the biggest pride in the world in this. I mentioned, and I firmly believe this, I don't have really any skill in life. I only have one thing that I don't even say this is a skill, but maybe just an anomaly. There's one thing, one area that I take pride in. And that is, I never had kids, but when I can introduce something to someone that I see the light go off and I'm like, change their life right there. Now they get it and they're all in and they're invested. Ketchup potato chips, prime example. Eddie's probably excited because I'm going to Los Angeles this weekend, meaning there's a chance at the airport I might bring him back a bag of the shrimp chips, which are fabulous, and he loved them. But Nathaniel, don't call me Atticus Finch. Would you like to reveal to the listeners here what it was that I introduced you to some 2 weeks ago that now all of a sudden has you circling the block like a vagrant down in the lower 50s in Allisonville Road, just waiting for him to open back up?
Patties of Jamaica, so good. And you know what? You live up there. Why didn't you bring one today? You blaming me? I tried.
No.
You didn't try.
I had to be to the Speedway today. I had stuff to do. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
I'm just saying. The patties are the best, and I thought you were going to bring me in a patty today, but that's okay. We got a big show lined up, by the way. Stephanie White going to join us coming up in the 1 o'clock hour today. Really enjoyed yesterday when we had Kelly Krauskopf on from The Fever. And we posted some of that audio, and the fun part about it is on one of the social media sites, the bot farm's got a hold of it. Have you noticed this?
Oh, yeah.
It's unbelievable now. Is the X-Post Twitter, is it done? Is it dead?
It's getting there. It is getting there.
Honestly. You can't. I love it, and I try to interact on it. But it's And it is a good, and I know Instagram and TikTok, there are other avenues. I get it. But I'm telling you, like anymore, you post one thing and the replies become so diluted with what is very clearly divisive intended bots, computer algorithms that just jump on, and they're all the same. Heather 028136, mother, neighbor, civically involved. And then, like, you look at her replies, and they're all over the board. And then, where is she from? USA. All the time. Now, Nathaniel, you're a young and hip guy. Is the Expos Twitter dead?
Not yet, but it is getting there.
You think it is?
It's so nasty. That's all it is. It's just hate.
So I'm not the only one that's noticed this. Right?
John was talking about it for a whole segment yesterday.
Was he?
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And most people, I don't know if John referenced this, but I think it was about 3 months ago, they were bragging about how they were doing a new feature on X. And the new feature was it was going to post where you posted from. So you post a picture, and underneath it says, Nathaniel Finch, Indianapolis, Indiana. And when it was only like that for, I don't even think it made it an entire day, because people started screen grabbing galore how all of these posts were from like Kazakhstan and seriously. And I don't know about Russia specifically, but it was mostly far Eastern European countries that were all of these, Betty 06135 that was talking about how concerned she was about her neighborhood in Texas, and then actually you find out that she's in Kabul. Okay. But yesterday when we posted it, like the bot farms got a hold of it. But Stephanie White going to join us today. Look forward to that. That's coming up at 1:15 today. And then again, 2 o'clock today, Christopher Knight, we're going to preview the big weekend at the Brady Bunch house. I can't tell. I haven't slept in 3 days. I'm fired up. But when we come back, I'm going to spell out for you, for example, getting Christopher Knight on the show. That began a year ago when I met him in Long Beach, and it's for a year that's been in the works for me to go to the Brady Bunch house more than for him to come on today. But for me to go to the Brady Bunch house Saturday night with Peter Brady, that's been in the works for a year. And sometimes you have to have foresight for things to come to fruition, and it doesn't happen right then. You go Crock-pot versus microwave. And Indiana right now is finally doing Crock-pot basketball-wise, but in terms of all of this and how it's all come together, where Indiana has the number one transfer portal class, not just in basketball, but football as well. And how did that happen? Not the way you think, but I'll tell you next. Hey there, Jake Query for something new from Surfside, the team that brought you Surfside, which you know and already love with the, for example, blueberry lemonade with a splash of vodka, the raspberry tea or the green tea with a splash of vodka, the half and half with vodka. How about now Super Light? That's right, Super Light Premium Vodka plus Aid, and it comes, Super Light does, in the following flavors: fruit punch, orange, lemon lime, and blue chill. All right there, perfect for the summertime, whether you're going to be out by the pool, whether you're out playing softball, or just hanging out in the backyard. Super Light is always the perfect thing to fuel the moment. Super Light, brought to you by Surfside. And don't forget, of course, the iced tea and the lemonade and vodka as well. Wherever you find your favorite adult beverages, no carbonation, so smooth. Look for it in any of those locations. Please be 21, though, and please drink responsibly.
Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
So Indiana is spending exactly that. Literally, like Ryan Carr and Darren DeVries are Oprah. They're like, you get a spot, and you get a spot, and you get a spot. But they're being very tactical in the way that they're going about doing that. That's what they kind of had to do last year. Now they're piecing together the jigsaw puzzle. And I've seen this a lot. I've seen a ton of, well, this is what happens when you got Mark Cuban in your corner. Okay. That's the overwhelming sentiment. And I'm not saying that Mark Cuban probably doesn't have some involvement. But Indiana is unique. Indiana is unique for a couple of reasons. It has the largest alumni base in the United States. Seems weird. You would think Texas does, or UCLA, because of the size of those schools in the areas that they're from. You would think those schools are the ones that have the largest alumni base, but it's Indiana University. Now, there's a little bit of a curveball to that. Did you attend Indiana University South Bend? Did you attend Indiana University Northwest? Did you attend Indiana University Kokomo? Or Indiana University Southeast? Or Indiana University Richmond? Indiana University Indianapolis? If you did, and you graduated from school at Indiana University Northwest, where you commuted from the area that you lived in Hobart, and then you said, Chicago's not for me, and you got a job offer in Phoenix, and you're like, let's go, and you moved to Phoenix, Arizona, you are listed by Indiana University as simply an alum of Indiana University. So when we hear about the largest alumni base, that's why. It's all the satellite schools as well, including Bloomington. But that's a lot of people. And it's a lot of people that are spread throughout the country, but most of them, if they went to Indiana, and I'll still say the majority, maybe not as high a percentage as it once was, but a large percentage grew up in Indiana or grew up rooting for Indiana athletics. And they went to Indiana University, and they grew up from the time they were freshmen in high school. They couldn't wait to go to IU, and then they went to IU, and they moved to Phoenix. Or they moved to wherever. Or they stayed in Indiana. But because they live in Indiana and grew up in Indiana, and then maybe left Indiana, but either way, there's that connection of the representation of who they are and where they're from. Purdue is a fabulous academic institution, one of the best, which is why you get people from all over the world that come for a number of their programs, as you do with Indiana as well. I get it. But Purdue graduates, because that degree is so specified and so special in in engineering and certain areas, the business school has really come a long way at Purdue and is top-notch. Purdue graduates oftentimes then scatter across the country, but they didn't grow up, many of them. They went to Purdue because of the elite academic programs. They didn't grow up necessarily all about Purdue, so it doesn't define them as much. It's not a knock. If anything, it's probably a compliment. But from Indiana's standpoint, you have that. You also have the fact that Indiana, especially when it came to football, Indiana had to be more creative. And when NIL was imminent, when NIL was coming without question on the horizon, Indiana, in terms of coming up with, and I'm talking about the athletic department in Indiana University, starting with when Fred Glass was on his way out or getting ready to retire, and then handing it over to, clearly, and Scott Dolson, somebody that he's been around his entire career as well. Indiana, when it comes to the NIL collectives, and some of this gets into a legal financial mumbo-jumbo that is far beyond my intellectual capability. But Indiana, in terms of understanding that the ruling for NIL was going to go above and beyond simply the player being able to do an ad for Crosstown Barbershop and get a free fade. Indiana knew that. Indiana saw that, and Indiana anticipated that. And so as a result of that, Indiana, before even everything was set to go, was already having meetings, and I'm sure other programs were, about how they were going to handle the NIL. And part of it was Indiana before other programs. If you think about the guys from Hoosier Hysterics, those guys from Hoosier Hysterics that were wearing the candy striped blazers and going into Kilroy's to interview like prospective players, and people, it got to the point where people were like, dude, what is going on here? But those guys were given the keys to the kingdom initially. They were given the keys to the kingdom to Indiana basketball because they were appropriating money to go into the NIL collectives so that they had a war chest of cash to be able to get players in the transfer portal or to lock in a key recruit that they were trying to land. And Indiana immediately recognized where this was going and basically said, let's have somebody that is facilitating all of this for us while we develop and establish our own NIL collective within the athletic department that the athletic department itself is not taking public dollars for, but is helping facilitate for the fundraising efforts to then go into this war chest that can then be distributed to build roster and accentuate things. But while they were putting all of that together, while they were brainstorming it, they basically said, let the guys like the Hoosier Hysterics guy kind of do it for us until we can figure out our own system. Let those guys kind of run our IT for us until we get in basically our own Microsoft division, and then suddenly, like, the two IT guys kind of become yesterday's news. And that's basically what happened. And that's why those guys went from full carte blanche access to actually now we're kind of going to take over some things here. And so Indiana had a vision well ahead of other programs. And they had a brilliant manner in which to bring the money in. Again, they themselves are not going out and doing it, but they're creating the collectives where the money can be distributed. Many of it upon private donations from the alumni base I just talked about, and not Mark Cuban directly, but kind of the unsung hero in it all. A guy that graduated from the Indiana School of Business in 1982, a guy that played for Lee Corso, a guy that had accolades as a football player, and then went on to an expansive financial career above and beyond and with numerous degrees from different universities, but never lost his passion for Indiana football. And so Indiana decided with Terry Tallon, who's the founder of the Tallon Capital Partners and has deep ties to Indiana and love for Indiana football. Terry Tallon is the one that basically said, let's sit down and figure this out, and I can also help you come up with money. Whether it be personally or whether it be his partnership group, but he has expansive business ventures through so many different areas that he was able to then use his guidance to say, follow my lead here. In a good way. In a good way. And that facilitated and allowed for Indiana to then get that baseline, and keep in mind in doing so, following the lead of one of its key personnel members in finance, in athletic support financially, that was a football, not basketball guy. Not to say he didn't like basketball, but he's a football guy. He played football. He wanted to see Indiana football get where it was. And for Indiana to come up with the money and the appropriation, and yes, Kurt Signetti helped, and so too did the JMU transfers. But if you are Indiana and you're using those resources, you're using that backbone, and a guy like Terry Tallon can kind of be in the wings while you're doing it all, because everybody assumes it's a higher profile billionaire alum. Not saying Mark Cuban didn't help, but it wasn't just Mark Cuban writing in and saying, here's a $20 billion check. Obviously, that's exaggerated. Here's a $20 million check. Go find a roster. It's deeper than that. It's more entrenched than that. It's more sophisticated than that. And it's more prepared than that. And for right now, it's rolling both in football and basketball because they use the football blueprint. And if you can turn around Indiana football and you can figure out how to use the financial resources to turn around that dog and pony show, then basketball is easy gravy. I mean, let's go, right? Basketball should just be turnkey. Because if you can turn around Indiana football, but it's a matter of also getting the right people. Is Josh Hoover going to be Fernando Mendoza? We're going to find out. We're going to find out. Speaking of finding out, I found out something last night in the NBA that I just went, seriously? Are you kidding me? I'll let you know what that is, and Stephanie White joins us just over 20.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
This is one of the best cultures in college football, if not the best, right? You're around a bunch of guys who've played a lot of football. You want to win, right? You want to be a part of a winning culture. If you're competitive enough, that's all you want to do. And you can see it from afar. You can see it from anywhere. But the guys here are amazing.
That is Joe Brunner, by the way, Indiana offensive lineman that comes to the Hoosiers from Wisconsin after multiple years in Wisconsin. So when we're talking about just, the portal and Indiana, look at the way Indiana basketball is doing it and the way Indiana football now is able to roll it. Indiana basketball going out and using the portal, and last year they just needed a roster. This year you get players that you hope will be there more than just 1 year, and that can establish that culture. And Indiana football has already done that. You bring in the JMU guys, 17 of them. You also bring in, you have success, clearly, and this culture is then created, and it grows itself then to where people, you are basically, other players are recruiting you because they hear about it. These guys all talk. They all know each other. And so they hear things like that. And that's why Indiana is able to kind of roll it in both areas. So last night, I mentioned before that, and I'm going to mention it again, I think the NBA play-in playoff is cool but confusing. It's hard for me to remember who's in and who's out. I'm like, oh, wait. So this team won, and then that means they got to play again, or this team lost. Now, but one team lost, and so they still get to play again, but the other one, I get very confused by it. But the other thing that I'm confused by, and when I heard it, I literally was like, are you kidding me? I couldn't believe it. The Oklahoma City Thunder, the same Oklahoma City Thunder that defeated the Pacers in Game 7. And I don't think there's much to dislike about the Oklahoma City Thunder. You can dislike that Clay Bennett essentially left in the middle of the night from Seattle, not literally but figuratively, to go to Oklahoma City in what my buddy calls Seattle super silence, because he already had the game plan. He already had everything in the works to figure out how to defect from Seattle because he wanted to take his franchise to his home city of Oklahoma City. We can poo-poo that all we want, but then again, the next segment we've got to talk about the Colts who did that from Baltimore some 40 years ago. And we can bemoan the fact that Sam Presti is kind of annoying because he's really good at what he does, quite frankly, and that for whatever reason, and maybe it's because it was in Oklahoma City and we all just kind of felt bad for him anyway because it's, what else is there to do in Oklahoma City? I guess. I think it's kind of Indianapolis of 1995. But the Thunder seemingly for like 40 years had a lottery pick. I mean, at one point they owned 42 lottery picks. So, but you give them credit because they've hit on most of them. It's one thing to have great picks. It's another to actually capitalize on them and make great selections. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was not the number one overall pick. Chet Holmgren's a really good player. He was a top 5 pick, granted. Jalen Williams, the good one, he was a late first rounder, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, they have really good players because they've hit on more often than not. And everyone that I have spoken to, this and $1.25 will get you a Coke, but everyone that I have spoken to that was at Game 7 actually said their fans were pretty cool. That everybody was like, hey, they were like almost apologetic about it, about what happened. So I can't hate on Oklahoma City totally. And we should actually here commend Oklahoma City. Here in Indianapolis, we should rejoice Oklahoma City. It's like the guys in American Pie. They're like, guys, we should be happy for Sherman, right? Sherman was in our club. We should be happy for him. And the Pacers should be happy for Oklahoma City or San Antonio because it's not New York. It's not L.A. It's not Chicago. And yet, last night by the Clippers, is that correct, Atticus? It's the Clippers, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The Clippers were eliminated. That means that they are in the lottery because they did not make the playoffs, even though they were in the play-in for the playoffs, but they got played out of the play-in for the playoffs, and so therefore they're out. So they're not in play in terms of the lottery. But their pick had already been traded to Oklahoma City. So Oklahoma City now has a lottery pick. And Oklahoma City has a 7.1% chance of landing inside of the top 3. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if it just so happens that Oklahoma City is the one now that ends up inside of the lottery, and for that reasoning, the Pacers get bounced out? Now, I mean, obviously they would get bounced out regardless because it wasn't a new pick created. It just is new in terms of who it belongs to. But it worries me because if Sacramento drafts in front of the Pacers, you're not worried about that. Sacramento is going to screw it up. Sacramento never gets the number 1 pick. They're not sending anybody to Sacramento. I mean, Chris Webber, sure, like on a trade. Okay. But Sacramento's not a threat. My goodness, they get Tyrese Halliburton, they trade him. Okay? But Oklahoma City has this golden horseshoe deep somewhere inside of its duodenum. And so Oklahoma City is like a threat to actually end up, wouldn't it be totally on par for Oklahoma City to just end up with the number 2 pick in the draft? Pacers have to be inside the top 4 or it gets shipped out. That much we know. And in terms of the players that will be available, do you happen to have the breaking news sounder, Nathaniel? The breaking news, or you can do it if you like. There we go. This just in from Duke University on their social media platforms. Boozer is returning for his sophomore year at Duke.
You're funny.
Caden Boozer. That is the other brother of Cam Boozer. One would expect that Cam Boozer will, in fact, stay in and be in the draft, right? But yes, Caden Boozer announcing that he will return to Duke. Caden is the one that threw the pass that was intercepted that Braylon Mullins ended up hitting to send Connecticut in to the Final Four. Stephanie White, by the way, in 20, and I said Stephanie White, right? Stephanie White in 20, and Christopher Knight at 2 o'clock. Peter Brady joining us just over an hour. Hey there, Jake Quarry for Chicago's Pizza. 30 minutes left today to get in for the lunch buffet, which is the best. The lunch buffet. Think about this. I want you to think about just a warm cheese that's just kind of melting into the pizza itself. Think about that deep dish crust that you love, or a traditional crust that you want to enjoy. Think about the very best, the tang, the sweetness, but also kind of that smooth nature, but still the chunk of the tomato sauce that's underneath that cheese that's just melting right there as you eat it. And then you say to yourself, man, this is so good. Not as good, not better, not worse, but on par with the breadsticks that I had that are fresh, hand-rolled, made this morning right there. And then I'm gazing across at the salad bar with everything glistening in terms of the freshness of that salad bar with all the fixings, all the toppings, and I get a soft drink while I'm just pondering all of this. The best thing about all of it is the price. Right on par with anywhere else you're going to go for lunch. That's what you get for the lunch buffet at Chicago's Pizza. Every day from 11 until 1:30 at any of their 19 Central Indiana locations, 26 locations statewide. And then, of course, tonight, the family meal deal, 2 medium, 1 topping pizzas for just $25. A story in every slice. ChicagosPizza.com.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Stephanie White coming up about 15 minutes from now. 239-1070 is the telephone number. Yesterday, Brandon, I love Brandon. Brandon is, I think most of you that have listened to the radio over the years are familiar with Brandon. He calls Eddie White a lot on the Pacers postgame. Hey, Jake, how's it going? That's Brandon. You know Brandon. And super good dude. Brandon's visually impaired, and he had a fascinating post yesterday on Facebook, I believe it was, where he talked about, and I found it touching, truthfully, because Brandon's, I don't know Brandon's age. If I had to guess, I'd say he's in his mid-30s. But he had a post about being visually impaired, and, you know, he's a person of very, very strong and deep faith. And so he was saying, you know, I try not to judge or hold any sort of angst at people, but just because we are blind, it doesn't mean that we're deaf and doesn't mean that we're not aware of our surroundings. And if we're with somebody that's guiding us, you know, holding onto their arm to walk through, you can ask us directly a question. You don't have to ask the guidance person. We can hear, we can talk. And he had a really interesting perspective about how being visually impaired, he still finds guidance in his life through his faith. And so, you know, at the end of it, he ended it by saying that he's blind. And I literally thought to myself, actually, I think you've got a vision that's probably stronger than most people. I realize not in the literal sense that we are so blessed and probably take for granted to have, but Brandon, within that, and I mentioned to Brandon, I just said, you know what, Brandon, it sounds to me like you got a pretty good vision. And he wrote back and said, you know, I appreciate that. By the way, you should take more calls. And I love taking calls. I do. But it's also harder in this time frame, in my opinion, to take calls. But Keith has called in to talk about the Pacers draft. They have to stay in the top 4 to hold on to that pick, Keith, and we'll see what happens. What's going on?
Well, you know, I think they might have, when they made this trade for Zubac, I think they had a lot of foresight. If you look at who's going to be, you know, the projections for who's going to go 5th through 9th, it's all point guards. And I think they recognized that and thought if we fall into that little zone, we might trade down anyway. And if that happens, if they fall out, if they keep the pick and they're outside the top 10, I hope and pray that we get Braylon Mullins. I love him as a player. I think he would fit in perfectly. He's my plan B.
Okay, a couple of things here, Keith. Number one, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll have to look at this, Tony East is going to join me at 2:30, and he can go over this better. I believe that where it slots right now, what's the lowest they could fall? Let me ask you that. Do you know?
6th. 6th is the worst they can get.
Yeah, so that pick can't fall into the teens, Keith. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
They either keep it or it's gone. There's no in between.
They have that new rule where you can only fall 5. That's right.
Yeah, so they that's the thing, right? So it's going to be top 4 or bust. Now, as for Mullins, let's just say hypothetically, Keith, for the sake of the discussion, let's say they make a trade that lands them a pick 12th or 15th or whatever, okay? Mullins, to me, and I don't know that Mullins comes back. I think Mullins is going to stay at UConn because right now, I mean, he's probably going to make $5 to $8 million by staying at UConn. And he is a very, very good player, and clearly he is an unflappable player for his age. The only thing that I would caution about with Mullins, and this has nothing to do with Braylon Mullins, so don't misquote me, but Keith, I want you to tell me if this makes sense. I think you're always weary of having an NBA player start their career in their hometown. I just think it comes with a glare, especially a younger one, a really young one. Does that make sense?
I think I think here in Indiana, we all just have thoughts of Damon Bailey, and I don't know if that's, I don't know. I'd like to see data on
I mean, with all due respect, Keith, I don't think anybody compares Braylon Mullins to Damon Bailey, right? I mean, Damon Bailey, everybody knew, was a ceremonial pick because the draft was in Indianapolis and they took him in the second round. They had 2 second-round picks that year. And they basically did him a solid by getting him knee surgery, right? And so it wasn't because of that Bailey, but even if you look, Lance Stevenson's a good example. When the Pacers took Lance Stevenson, the Knicks had 2 picks right before Indiana. And he's a schoolboy legend and a playground legend in New York. And the Knicks bypassed on him, not because of anything against Lance Stevenson, but especially based on Stephon Marbury and things like that, all of the pressures that come with a hometown guy. Now, once a guy is established, it's a little bit different. But for a Mullins, and I'm not saying that Braylon Mullins wouldn't be able to handle it. I just think it's a challenge. It creates that much more potential distraction. Does that make sense?
I think it does. I think it depends on the person and their personal situation and what type of people they have surrounding them. You know, I don't know anything about Mullins or Lance back in the day, but I agree with you.
I mean, there's no doubt Mullins is going to be a good NBA player. It's Keith, I'll tell you, it's tough. The draft is a complete crapshoot, and that's the one thing that's funny to me. You know, you look at is it Corey Kispert is his name that was at Gonzaga?
Yeah, that's right.
Who's elite level shooter, really good player, and he's okay. And I don't know, is Mullins going to be an elite level player at the NBA level, or is he going to be a nice complementary, third or fourth scoring option on a team? I mean, he's really young. That's why I'm so much more impressed. And by the way, did you say, Nathaniel, now typically when Stephanie White comes on, we play music coming out of the break, right? She made a specific music request, but based on her schedule, couldn't join until 15 after. So that means that there's no music coming out. So are you just going to play music? How are we doing this?
This will be like a WrestleMania intro. Glass breaks, Stone Cold Steve Austin walks out. That's what we're thinking.
So all of a sudden, music's playing, and I know that means that Stephanie White's on hold. Is that how we're doing this?
Cut you off in the middle of a big important thing you're talking about. No regard, I'm playing it.
By the way, Christopher Knight, a.k.a. Peter Brady, a.k.a. Phil Packer. He's on the West Coast. So when I asked him if he could do the show, he goes, well, what times? And I said, how about 2 o'clock? That's 11 on the West Coast. And he said, yeah, that's about right. That's about early. That's the top of the morning for me. So I just sent him a thing saying, we'll call you in an hour. I want to remind you so you can start chugging energy drinks now. And he wrote back. The energy drink, that's hard for me to say, chugging and seizing has already begun. Let's go. Let's go. I'm all for it, man. So all of a sudden, I'm just going to hear music, and that's how I'm going to know that Stephanie White is on the line. Is that it?
Exactly.
Okay.
And now we've let everybody in the world know that that's the plan. And we got rid of the mystique.
I figured we need to let them know that's the plan in case all of a sudden, because you had mentioned to me that was the possibility. If all of a sudden music hits, I'm going to wonder what the heck's going on. So people are all of a sudden just going to hear it, right? Hey, Jake, for sure, a different era. Big George McGinnis worked out pretty well, I would think. That said, less so for Rick Mount. Yeah, different era, though. Again, for sure. There are exceptions. George McGinnis, though, I mean, you're talking about a Hall of Fame player, right? And George McGinnis was a man from the time he was a freshman at Washington. I mean, McGinnis, the classic tale, of course, being the Indiana-Kentucky All-Star game. And after round number 1, the Kentucky coach saying that George McGinnis was overrated. So what did he do in game 2? 53 and 31? I think that's right. 53 points and 31 boards. It's not bad. That's a decent outing. Fever, of course, putting their roster together, and 3 draft picks, all 3 the same position. That in its own is interesting, but I kind of got the impression that the way that worked out is because I mentioned it yesterday. I don't think that there's anything that you necessarily jump out at and say that is a glaring hole or position that needs to be filled. It seems like it was more, let's just complement around the roster of what we have and try to get ourselves depth. And there has to be, you would think, there has to be some element of what happened last year in terms of their just the nonstop. You remember and it was remarkable what they did. I mean, it truly was remarkable what they were able to do in consistently having to replace guards in the postseason. Just the way the injuries worked. I mean, it was incredible. But you could see that clearly the guard position was one for the Fever that they needed depth last year. And so now they add depth by getting 3 of the same position. You have an elite on-ball defender. You have a really good shooter. I think Justine Passat coming out of Vanderbilt, from everything I've read, not just an elite shooter, but also kind of a late developing shooter. And I don't know how often you go with or what the precedent is on keeping, 3 draft picks. Are they going to keep all 3? I mean, they could do now the kind of two-way, if you want to call it that, player. They get 2, I think, additional. So I want to talk to Stephanie about just the overall feel for the roster. And then also, we talked more with Kelly about this yesterday, perhaps, but just how difficult an offseason it was to navigate through everything. And, to figure out exactly when they were going to be able to formulate a roster and how they were going to be able to formulate a roster and everything that goes into it. And, those are the things that I'm curious to hear about. Because I would think it'd be difficult to just know it was a topsy-turvy offseason, at least from the outside. But what about from the inside, right? And do you also, when you go that deep into the playoffs, and somewhat of, I hate to say a surprise. I don't mean to discredit them. But considering the injuries, the run that they went on, is that the kind of thing that you can recapture a second time? Or, okay, so now can you explain to me the name of this? Is that Taylor Swift? Okay, and this is the song that Stephanie White told you she wanted to hear. And the name of the song is what, Nathaniel?
You need to calm down.
Okay.
Probably a hidden meaning behind that, Jake.
I was going to say, she joins us now on the program. And Stephanie, are you telling me that I need to calm down here? I want to know what it is I need to calm down about. Maybe just life in general.
How do you not know Taylor Swift? You need to calm down because I got like 57 text messages from you in the last 4 days. Like, what's going on?
Listen, I'm thorough. I want to make sure. I imagine.
I like it.
I imagine that you have a billion things going on, right? And so I'm like, you know what? I need to make sure that I'm reminding you.
That's right. No, I appreciate the reminders. I do.
Now, I'm curious about this. And I'm not saying that you're involved in this in any way, shape, or form. Do I have to hand deliver, or can I put in the mail the signed restraining order that I agreed to that was just sent to me?
Probably put it in the mail.
All right, fair enough.
Probably put it in the mail.
Well, first off, thanks for rejoining here. Obviously, and I'm going to calm down. I'm taking a deep breath here, okay?
Yes, good job.
But
woosah.
Thank you. Was it a difficult offseason just with, it was kind of unprecedented with all of the things that were going on. So how was it to navigate through it?
It was challenging just because there were so many unknowns. I mean, it wasn't, you didn't know when things were going to break, if they were going to break, when we were going to have a resolution. The waiting and the unknown, as we all know, oftentimes is the highest anxiety piece. So it was challenging in that way. And then it becomes even more of a challenge once you get down to now everything's thrown together in a period of like 10 days. And so you're trying to get your team together. You're trying to figure out, like, thank goodness, I don't have to do what the GM does and try to figure out numbers and, build a team from that standpoint. And then once we finally figure out who's on our team, now we've got about 3 days to prepare for training camp. So, I think it's been challenging in those ways. It's been a necessary challenge for where we are at the point of our league and the growth of our league. But yes, it does bring some anxiety.
When you look at the way that last year ended, and I mean the positive side of it, I mean the fact that you guys just were able to dig down so deep, right? And we talked about that. Did you find over the course of the offseason that now became more of something that lit a fire that almost made you angry because it was that close, or a pride factor in being able to overcome a lot of adversity?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. Certainly proud of our group and proud of our ability to overcome all of the adversity that we overcame. I mean, if you really sit back and look at it from that perspective, we probably didn't have any business being in the position that we were in, but proud because those women in the locker room and the way that they elevated and the way that they came together and the way that they embraced every situation and just continued to put one foot in front of the other, that's what allowed us to be in that position. And so, oftentimes in sport, we talk about, what you see on paper is not what happens once you get on the floor. And I think that what you saw on paper at the end of the year was much different than the product that we put on the floor because of the women in that locker room. I always say that connected teams are winning teams, and that connectedness and that chemistry, is good for 10 to 15 points a ball game. But then there's that fire of, we're a bad call and 5 minutes away from, going to the finals, right? And so then it's you're pissed off, and you think about missed opportunities early in the season that would have put us in a position to host at home in Game 5 instead of going on the road, and just thinking about the ways in which we can best position ourselves when we get in a run like that in the future.
What was the biggest void on your team that you felt needed to be addressed for this season?
Yeah, I think continuing to build quality depth. I mean, look, it's hard because of the sample size of last year was so, construed because of all of the injuries. So we didn't really get a full look at what our team could have been. We were managing crisis, for lack of a better term, for most of the season anyway. We needed to get more depth, quality depth at every position. We needed to get a little bit more physicality in defense. We went from bottom of the league to middle of the pack in the defensive end of the floor, and we want to get to the top of the pack. And of course, making sure we got healthy, making sure that we come into this season, ready to go and ready to rock.
By the way, if you had to guess, Stephanie White is my guest, the head coach of the Fever. If you had to guess, would you say that you are or are not the first person to ever have to tell me to calm down?
I would say I'm not the first person that's ever had to tell you to calm down.
Okay, fair enough. Well, listen, nobody ever had to tell me that when I was doing the morning show because I didn't wake up till 11 and we were done at 10, so it was kind of comatose there for a while, right? But that's just the way it goes.
I'm glad they gave you a better time slot now.
That's right. See, now I'm awake, but now I got to.
They put you in position to be successful there.
They did, but I got to take a step back every once in a while and just serenity now. Did you guys get better defensively? I mean, Raven Johnson, when I looked at it, I thought might have been the best perimeter defender in the draft. But
yep.
Is that how you saw it?
Yeah, for sure we got better. I mean, she was the defensive player of the year in the SEC, which is the toughest defensive conference in the country. She can guard really multiple positions. She takes great pride in being an elite defender. And oftentimes, and I remember we said this when we drafted Tiffany Mitchell from South Carolina. South Carolina players are always going to be ready on the defensive end, and I think Raven Johnson was naturally always an elite defender anyway. So we get better there, point of attack defense, no question about it. You think about who we added in free agency, though. Mo Billings, elite communicator, great defender. Maisha Hines-Allen, elite communicator, elite defender. And so it gives the ability to change up some matchups because Aaliyah Boston was always guarding the 4-player on the floor. And now we give AB a little bit of a break and a blow from having to be a focal point offensively and be a focal point defensively.
I wanted to give you a chance to kind of add on to something that I saw you saying this week when you were talking about the draft and just the players coming out and the coaching they got from Dawn Staley. And I could tell that you have a great respect for the way that she prepares her players, not just maybe the style in which they play, but also the discipline that they have to have. I talked to Kelly a little bit about this yesterday, but how much for you also do you factor that in when you're bringing a player in terms of the background that they've had in the way they've been coached?
Yeah, I think we have to. We have to think about the way that they've been coached, the way that they've been challenged, the systems that they've been in. Does it prepare them to be great pros? Does it prepare them to be ready to be in rotation or not? What does the trajectory look like when you draft them? And certainly, you want players who have been challenged, who have been coached. And when you think about a point guard playing for one of the best point guards of all time in Dawn Staley, you know that she's going to see the game a certain way. She's going to expect something out of you because she was one of the best to do it. And so when you're challenged on a day-to-day basis, the way that Raven was challenged, I think it's a great opportunity for us to know that she's going to be ready. Now, she's going to be a rookie and she's going to go through things, but in terms of what it means to be coached, what it means to be challenged, what it means to be ready on the defensive end of the floor, what it means to prepare and compete, the thing I love that she said all the time is like, I want to win. Like, I want to win. And that's all she's done in her career. I think in her career in high school and college, she's lost 11 games, something crazy like that. I mean, that's insane.
When you look at players that have just won, right? I mean, Caitlin Clark is one, obviously, in college. I mean, I know that, right on the cusp there, right? And yet last year, I know it was tough for everybody. And you probably got tired of us asking all the time, like when, where things stood in terms of that. What will the reacclimation period be, if you will? What's that?
I said, yes, I did. I felt like J.J. Redick, the other day when he said there won't be an update, right, until there's an update.
Right. I mean, I get it, right? It's that catch-22, right? Because people want to ask, but at the same time, there's no. But having said that, what is the time period or the acclimation, if you will, not just for her, but also the teammates around, or although is it advantage because you have a lot of new faces, so it's new for everybody?
Yeah, I think it's new for everybody. I think we got to be smart. She has worked her butt off this whole off season to prepare herself. We have an added advantage in that she played games in March, right, with USA Basketball. And so she has game exposure. She has game pace. She has game rhythm. She has game timing. And so we have an advantage. But we also want to be smart. She doesn't need every rep in practice. Like we want to continue to ramp her up. It's a long season, 44 games, and we play a heavy cadence of games in a week. And so we want to be smart in camp and make sure we I don't want to say ease her into it because she's ready for camp, but we want to make sure that we manage the reps and what kinds of reps she's getting just to build her up so that she's ready to go. And we don't have any kind of questions about that.
I got to thinking about this, Stephanie. Stephanie White, the head coach of the Fever, my guest. If situations arise again where people start asking the same question repeatedly and you get to the J.J. Redick level, right?
Yeah.
Then I think you bring your phone and you just hit this. As soon as they ask, you just hit this on your phone, right? Go ahead, Nathaniel. Hit me up here. There we go. There you go. You just played that, right?
I agree. Can you have that as like a favorites that just comes up, or is it like Siri play you need to calm down?
Well, then it kind of kills the mystique if you're saying the title, right? Because then everybody can figure out what you're talking about.
Yeah, amen. That's
hey,
true.
in your coaching off season, you obviously were doing both radio and television for, in basketball, the NBA, and a number of areas. What was the best game you saw in the off season?
Oh, man, that Christmas Day game when I had the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. And it was a late game, so I'm sure not everybody on the East Coast was up for it. But that game, Jokic had like a 50-something triple-double. Edwards made an incredible corner three to send it to overtime. I mean, that game had to have been one of the most exciting games that I saw all offseason.
Does Jokic have the best vision in basketball?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, he's incredible. And he makes it look so easy, and he never gets rushed, and he plays at the same pace. And, you can use him as a hub everywhere that he goes. Like the way that he and Jamal Murray play together. I mean, and I remember talking to Caitlin and to Aaliyah when I first got the job. It's like, we want you two to be so, yoked like those guys that you can play through either one of them. They know how to play together. We got a small sample size of it with those two, but I think we're going to see even more of it this season.
Okay, lastly, I want to ask you, Stephanie White, the head coach of the Fever. We've talked before about like shows you watched, music you watched growing up. Okay, now I'm super stoked about this. Matter of fact, I do need to calm down. I know on this next thing. Did you at any point, and I know that it was long in syndication by the time that you were watching TV. Did you watch the Brady Bunch at all as a kid? I
watched the Brady Bunch a little bit as a young kid. Yeah.
Okay. So the Brady Bunch house. I don't know if you know, they've redone the house that they use in the Brady Bunch, and now it's like been renovated to the actual house. So last year, Coach, I'm at the IndyCar race in Long Beach, and I look over, and I'm like, that's Peter Brady.
No way.
The actor that played Peter Brady. So I walk over to him, and I said, "Excuse me, are you Christopher?" I think I might have actually said, "Are you Peter Brady?" And so we get to talking, and I'm expanding upon him my vast knowledge of Brady Bunch trivia, which I could tell he was very impressed. And
he said, "You need to calm down."
beyond that, so once he got me calmed down and things were stabilized, then he says, "Hey, listen, when are you heading back?" And I said, "Well, as soon as the race is over, I'm out of here, And he says, "Oh, it's too bad. I would have invited you over to the Brady Bunch house where I could then show you like the filming sets." And I said, "Wait, what?" And he says, "Yeah,
Wow.
next," and he says this, "Next year, look me up." That's what he says. Okay, next year, look me up. So, and obviously he's thinking he's never going to hear from me again, right?
Yep.
Well, so needless to say, I got the dogs on the assignment and ended up getting his phone number and calling and leaving him a voicemail where I did lose my dignity. And he last week calls me back and goes, "Yeah, I'm all for it. Let's do the house Saturday night after qualifying," which is this coming Saturday. We'll go there, and then maybe we'll go over to the Paramount set, and I'll show you some things there as well. We can make pork chops and applesauce, the whole deal. And he says, and I said, "Well, I need you to come on the show." And he said, "No problem. How about Thursday?" And so he's coming on in like 33 minutes. Now,
That's incredible.
I'd like to know if you have any questions you want me to ask Peter Brady.
I don't have any questions that I want you to ask Peter Brady, but I do think that's a great story. I do think that's a great story.
Do you have no questions?
Now,
mostly
we were talking about Friends. Like I would maybe, because that was more kind of when I was really locked into television,
right.
when Friends came on
of
board.
Course.
But
I mean, I realize the Brady Bunch has been off the air for a double nickel
a long
right?
time. Yeah, a long time.
Seinfeld, yes or no on Seinfeld?
Some Seinfeld, yes, but I wasn't like all in it the same way I was Friends.
See, Friends was okay, but I'll be honest, I watch it now and I'm like, it's kind of cheesy. I don't know that it stands.
Everything from those days is kind of cheesy. Like everything I thought was a classic is now cheesy.
Saved by the Bell? Were you a Saved by the Bell kid?
I was Saved by the Bell.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
Of course I was.
I'm cool with that. Started in Indianapolis, of course. All right, so
Yeah,
things get underway. Your schedule now is what in terms of the Fever and the immediacy here moving forward?
Well, coaches meetings, because now that we've got a team, we're trying to put some things together, and we start training camp on Sunday, the 19th. So ready to roll.
All right, we look forward to having you on over the course of the year if I can calm down.
Yep.
Is that cool?
Yes, for sure.
All right.
For sure.
Fewer texts, I promise. Appreciate it as always, Coach.
Appreciate it, Jake. Thank you.
All right, Stephanie White joining me on the program. I'm telling you, maybe I do need to calm down. It's the Peter Brady factor. Nathaniel, you probably never watched the Brady Bunch, right?
I've seen a little bit, not really though.
I think the Brady Bunch, and I'm going to ask him this, but I think the Brady Bunch basically was now, there's a huge gap in years here. I realize that. I mean, probably a 20-year gap in terms of the time of production, 15 maybe. But the after-school aspect of shows that you watched when you came home from school, the after-school aspect, I think, transitioned from Brady Bunch, because it was in syndication for so long, it spanned a couple of generations, into Saved by the Bell. And I think Saved by the Bell at that point, like, kind of took over the throne of Now, did you watch Saved by the Bell?
Did not.
Really? How old were you when you made your first buggy? I'm just kidding. You didn't watch Saved by the Bell?
I didn't watch that. I didn't know it was made in Indy, though. That's cool.
Well, the first season of Saved by the Bell was called Good Morning, Miss Bliss. And there's actually a line where I think the only time they really reference it is they mention jumping on the top of the RCA Dome. I think they say Hoosier Dome. And then there's an episode later, once they're at Bayside, where I mentioned this before, and it's the worst, literally the worst clip in television history. It's the most embarrassing thing ever when Screech has Jim Harbaugh on. See if you can find the YouTube clip of when Jim Harbaugh appears on. Screech convinced everybody that Jim Harbaugh was his cousin. And everybody's like, no, there's no way. And then everybody writes it off that Screech was out of his mind. And then, in fact, Screech one day in class announces, Mr. Belding comes in and says, like, Jim Harbaugh is here. He's just walking around the school. And I think, like, Screech is walking around wearing a Colts helmet trying to act like he's Jim Harbaugh. Did you find that by any chance, Nathaniel? All right, this is the greatest moment in TV of the late 80s, early 90s. Well, this would have been mid-90s, 94, 95. Here we go.
Jim Harbaugh was going to come help me with this, but I guess he couldn't make it.
Jim Harbaugh? I'm from Indianapolis, Mr. Little. What's my hero have to do with all this?
Okay.
Well, he was going to come speak to the class as part of our project.
Okay, see if you get to the part where Screech walks in the football uniform. And they introduced it.
Screech, what are you doing?
Jim couldn't make it. I'm filling in.
So he's dressed as Jim Harbaugh here, right? Mr. Belding made the arrival yet, Nathaniel? Has Mr. Belding walked in and made the arrival yet? Where he walks in to let everybody know that Jim Harbaugh has arrived at school?
Hey, everybody.
we
Look
go.
who I found
Here we
wandering
go.
around the halls. You'll never guess who Screech's cousin is.
Hi, everyone. I hope I'm not too late.
Jim, you made it.
Everyone's probably just a little bit confused because we look so much alike. But this is my cousin, the real Jim Harbaugh.
What a moment in TV history. And I can tell you, living in Indianapolis at the time, even though I was like 23 years old and 15 years too old to be watching that, I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And I thought, there will never again be a moment in television history that more, like, puts Indianapolis on the map when it comes to a quarterback than Jim Harbaugh being on Saved by the Bell. Little did I know. Little did I know. All right, back into, by the way, when we were talking about the Pacers and that draft pick. There is one player that we know is not going to be in this year's draft. That announcement earlier. I'll get into that next. Hey there, Jake Query for Love Heating and Air. Love-HVAC.com is the website. 317-353-2141 is the telephone number for Love Heating and Air, an official Heil Heating and Cooling dealer. And Love Heating and Air, there are several reasons why you last 100 years as a family-owned business. Number one, you got great product. And if you're an official Heil Heating and Cooling dealer, it goes without saying that's the case. Number two, you have great integrity and great pricing. You get that with Love Heating and Air and 24-hour on-call maintenance as well. I've known him my entire life, and I am absolutely certain that you will feel like family when you go with Love Heating and Air. An official Heil Heating and Cooling dealer 317-353-2141, love-HVAC.com.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
I saw the other day someone referenced this song and said, man, this is a dark song once you think about what it's about. And it's a good song. But doesn't everyone know what it's about?
Every time I play it, I hope that nobody thinks that way.
It's a great song.
Dance around to it. Oh, yeah.
But it's a little dark, right? But I thought it was interesting, though, when someone's like, you know what that's about, right? And I'm like, how would you not? I mean, the lyrics are pretty clear, right? So, for what it's worth. What song... I'll tell you the song that is got to be the most commonly deciphered, and there are so many variations as to what it means. It's an old song. But you talk to 5 different people, and 5 different people will tell you 5 different stories they read in 5 different publications that are absolute fact. And as to the meaning of the song.
Madonna Like a Prayer?
That's got to be up there. Right? I was going to say Sound of Silence, right?
Yeah, it's fair.
I mean, that absolutely, for me, Sound of Silence, like, some people are like, oh, no, like, Art Garfunkel had a friend that was blind, and then other people are like, no, it's about his depression of being in the bathroom, and then other people are like, no, it's just that the bathroom is where, because of the acoustics in it, where Paul Simon would write songs. A million different deciphers. NBA draft, we know this. We talked about it earlier. The Pacers cannot select, unless they make a trade, they are destined to select inside of the top 4 or send the pick to the Clippers. Clippers are probably hoping for that because the Clippers now found out that their pick is on its way to Oklahoma City. Of course, Oklahoma City ends up with a lottery pick, or a draft pick, right? And it's going to be a lottery pick for that matter. The narrative that Boozer is a player that the Pacers would have interest in, one of them is in the draft, but it's Caden Boozer, not Cam Boozer. Caden Boozer and not Cam Boozer is in the draft, or excuse me, is staying in school, sorry. Cam Boozer will almost certainly be in the draft. Caden Boozer announcing earlier today that he will not be in the draft. He is returning to Duke. They are brothers. Cam is the one that is the far better player. That's unfair to say, but certainly at this point is far more on the radar than Caden Boozer. Which player the Pacers would go with probably depends somewhat on which place that they are selecting and whether they are taking 1, 2, 3, or 4. I still believe that DeBonsa is the guy. If they had the number 1 overall pick, I know John and I talked about it the other day, that's got to be who it is. You got to go with DeBonsa in that circumstance. I just think he could do so many things. But watching last night and seeing the playoffs are now set, I can't be the only one, though. I can't be the only one that cannot be the only one that thinks that it's confusing. Art joins the program. Hi, Art. How are you?
Fine.
You're on the air, by the way, Art.
Okay. Well, I'm driving down the road, but my niece was married to Christopher Knight.
Really? Now, wait,
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, Art, where are you driving right now?
Well, I'm grocery shopping.
Oh, okay. But you're in Indianapolis, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Well,
now-
I live in Plainfield.
Now, let me ask you. So your niece was married to Christopher Knight. I believe he's been married 3 times, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Did by all account, he didn't try to pull any Phil Packer funny business, did he?
No.
Nice guy?
Very nice wedding.
Okay. And did you go out to California for it?
No, it was in Joliet, Illinois.
That's no way. Now, are you saying he was married to her or still is married to her? Because he told me his wife's from Chicago.
Was married to her.
Okay.
And the service was in Joliet, Illinois.
Nice enough fellow, though?
Yeah.
And
she was, her name was Adrienne Curry, and she was America's Next Top Model.
I do remember that. That was recently, right? Wasn't it fairly recently?
No, it's been quite a while.
Okay. And so when we have him on now, here's the thing. Should I mention this when he comes on, Art, or should we just keep that between us?
I don't know. I'm not sure what his reaction would be.
So you're his former uncle-in-law, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to say now. Would he know if I just said uncle-in-law, the grocery shop in Art? Would he know?
No, he would not.
Did you watch?
If you mentioned Adrienne, of course, he would know that.
Yes, I would think so. I would think he would know that. Now, Joliet, that's near the prison, right? The wedding wasn't in the prison, was it?
No, it wasn't. It's near there. The prison Al Capone was in there. It was called Stateville. Was the prison?
Heck yeah! All right. Well, Art, I'll tell you what. We'll tell him you said hi. How's that?
Yeah. Well, luckily our last names aren't the same. So if my name was Art Curry, that might stir remember.
well, listen, I'll find out. We'll delicately tiptoe around it, right? I mean, I'll just.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. We'll let and thank you for calling in the program. Everything going all right with the grocery shop and everything's good, right?
Oh yeah, it's great.
All right, thank you, Art. Appreciate
it. Very, very, very nice. With those two people, I thought, it was a match made in heaven, sort of. But as things go, they don't always last.
That is true, Art. That's true. I'm telling you what. I mean, it might be. I was worried that you were going to tell me that Peter Brady was a rat fink. That would have bothered me. But he joins us in just over 15.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
There's been an appeal in the NBA. Happened just before we came on, as a matter of fact. Luka, as well as Cade Cunningham, now eligible for end-of-season awards because they appealed. Look, just because I didn't play the 65-game threshold, I get it to an extent. A guy, just because if a player doesn't hit the threshold because of their own, like Mark Dykton, If a player is Mark Dykton and they miss the threshold because they just decided to take 37 PTO days, that's one thing, right? But a player has an injury and they're unavailable, then that's not necessarily the fault of the player. And I love Dykton. I'm jabbing at him. But my point being, if it's and I get the fact that the threshold is there to try to dissuade, if you will, if that's a word, players from doing the load management thing. It's different when a guy is playing and then with 20 games left in the season, there's an injury that takes place that ends his year. That he has nothing to do with that. And he's not electing to bypass availability. I thought Wembanyama, it was fascinating to me when Wembanyama was recently asked about whether or not that was fair, and he went into this thing like, well, you talk about 65 games. What if they only play 60% of the games? And he was doing the numbers in his head. He's like, 65 games, if we play, 48 minutes, and he knew the number right there of what the number was off the top of his head, and you subtract this. And I mean, I can do numbers in my head pretty quickly, but nothing like what he was doing. But he made a very good point of, okay, so if a guy has to play in 65 games, but he only plays 12 minutes a game for 65 games, does that count? Is that better than just taking games off? And when you talk about load management, that's been such a buzz phrase, such an almost taboo phrase, such a bad word, if you will, for so long that I think people lose sight of the fact that players do play more games now, and notably like a LeBron, I mean, he's playing year-round. He's basically playing year-round. When you factor in for so long, think about the Pacers right now. We can sit here and joke about load management and rip on load management, but think about the fact that you have right now a Pacers roster that went deep into the year, that was playing into June, and look at the number of players for the Pacers that got dinged and nicked up at the beginning of the season. Now, was the threshold of what is considered a legit I need to miss time injury adjusted or more flexible because of the situation that we all knew that they were in? Maybe. But I think the Pacers this year lead credence to those that talk about how players are soft. Are they? Or is an 82-game schedule, and I know they get paid a ton of money. I'm not sitting here trying to be some apologist for NBA players, but the physical toll on the body, because you think about not just playing in a game and the size and the speed of players today versus 40 years ago, the pace in which they're playing, the toll physically speaking, and they're in great shape and they have nutritionists and all of those things. But even still, I think a lot when I'm sitting there at a Pacer game and I'm watching the game. And I always got a kick out of the post-game coach's handshake. Used to be the coaches would go to midcourt and handshake and say something. Now, I see Rick Carlisle looks down to insert name of opposing team coach. And they look down, and Quinn Snyder sees him, and they make eye contact, and they give a thumb up and a wave, like, all right, man, good seeing you. We're out. Because they want to get on. The visiting team, I mean, yeah, they got obligations. They got to do the press conference. They get showered. They get on the bus. But you think about it, more often than not, when I'm sitting there watching a game, and you're thinking, man, it's 10:30. I got to go to work tomorrow. Maybe not that, 9:30. Those teams are then loading up, getting on a plane. Yeah, of course, they're not flying Spirit. I get it. But still, they're getting to some new city at 2:30 in the morning. They're getting to the hotel. They take the bus straight to the hotel. They're falling asleep by 3 or 4, and then they're up at 11 for shoot-around. You do that 82 times, I don't care how elite your physical conditioning is. I don't care how elite your athleticism is. You do any of that over the course of time, and it's going to take its toll on you. It just is. And then you get no time for the recovery aspect of it. And if you look at teams that go deep into the playoffs the next year, it's tough. So I get why players want the time, you know what I mean? Or want to take the day off and just try to save energy, try to save it where you can. Totally understand it. But Luka Doncic, Cade Cunningham, eligible now for the end-of-season awards. The NBA and the Players Association said that they had extraordinary circumstances, and that's why they were not eligible for the 65-game threshold. Yeah, I would say injury like that is an extraordinary circumstance. And with all of that said, Luka Doncic is a wonderful player. He's an almost unstoppable offensive player. I don't know that he necessarily impacts his teammates as well as other players. Cade Cunningham, for that matter, being one of them, that I think that has a better impact on his teammates. But nobody, the most valuable player in the NBA, and it's not close. Actually, this year it should be Tyrese Halliburton. I mean, show me somebody that had a greater impact on their team to better illustrate their value than Tyrese Halliburton. But Nikola Jokic is the MVP, right? I mean, realistically, of those that played. What he does, I thought Stephanie White just said it right there. I mean, he is a conduit to so many things. He had a pass this year. The Pacers are playing Denver. They had a transition break where he got a rebound with one hand, like in literally he rebounded, and then it was almost like watching a football throwing machine. He had this, his back was to their basket. So he goes up to get a rebound. So he's facing the backboard that he's getting the rebound off of. And he does it with one hand, and without even looking, he flinged it over his back, over his shoulder to a perfectly in stride, it might have been Jamal Murray, for a layup. I mean, like 80 feet. And I have no idea how he even knew, unless it was just the symmetry of teamwork and understanding of one another. I have no idea how he knew that player, and I'll say Murray for the lack of a better one to know specifically. I have no idea how he was aware that they were even on the break, unless they've just done that so many times. But how he knew exactly where they were, I kid you not, the guy never turned around. And right then, I just thought to myself, this guy is totally different. Not that I didn't already know that, but he's totally different. And there are certain things that you flat out cannot teach. You just can't. There's just no way to anticipate or see or visualize that kind of thing without just natural feel. And I think we've all had certain sports that you have a natural feel for. I had a natural feel as a young kid on how to play basketball. I never got a natural feel how to play baseball. I played from kindergarten through 7th grade, played baseball. Never once felt comfortable in a batter's box, never felt comfortable with a baseball coming towards my glove, just didn't have the hand-eye, whatever it was. Basketball-wise, when I would get the ball on a wing, I just naturally hadn't, I'm not saying it made me good, but I had just a feel that I didn't have to necessarily practice of knowing like what the angle was or how to get to the basket. Couldn't roller skate to save my life, can't snow ski. So I don't know. Some people are just born with, I'm not saying me. In Jokic's case, that hand-eye coordination, that vision. Larry Bird had it. Magic Johnson had it. Isaiah Thomas had it. Jokic has it as well as anybody I've ever seen. But he is the MVP. Luka can appeal for eligibility. Cade Cunningham can appeal for eligibility. The most valuable player of those that played this year was Jokic, and the most valuable player in terms of what this year illuminated as to the reality of their value would absolutely be Tyrese Halliburton. And I know you can't give it to him. Can you imagine that if they said, you got to play 65 games or none, and if you play none and your team sucks, you're the MVP. All right, cool. All right, last year is when it all began when I saw Christopher Knight, who plays Peter Brady at the Long Beach race, found out actually there is an Indiana sports tie-in to this as to how I even met him. And I can't wait to ask him a ton of questions about the Brady Bunch. We'll do it next.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
When it's time to change, then it's time to change.
That's how it sounded when Christopher Knight and the rest of the Brady Bunch singers, they were going to be the big musical act, and I can't deny the fact that when the iPhone came out, I did download their entire music. What is it? Discography? I have all of them, I think, on my phone. It was last year at Long Beach when I serendipitously met Christopher Knight, who portrayed Peter Brady on the Brady Bunch, and I have basically stalked him ever since. So he joins the program now from the West Coast, where he has been feverishly drinking coffee for 5 hours. Isn't that right, Chris?
I have been seizing today for hours already.
Yeah, okay.
Which is a lie. No, it's just really been a short period that I have been drinking my coffee and find myself awake. Good morning or afternoon, Jake. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Listen, I am so stoked for this.
Are you well? Because what you just expressed worries me. The entire discography.
Oh, all of it. You kidding?
Our music, which is something I'm proud to say that I only made better, I guess. What does it sound like when Peter cracks his voice? Is it like throwing a rod or seizing a piston? What do you think it is?
You hit the rev limiter. You hit the rev limiter is what it was, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, I think something broke. I think something breaks when an engine sounds like that.
Well, now
there's no coming back from it.
Now, was your voice really changing, or did Sherwood Schwartz in the group just say, you know what, we're just going to write in that you're going through puberty?
Acting, my friend. It was method. No, I had not yet begun to have a voice that changed. So I was imitating others, expressing to me what it is like when one's voice changes. Or I think it's from their perspective, hearing someone whose voice is cracking, whom they're assuming their voice is changing. They gave me that. It's similar to how I did Humphrey Bogart. I was imitating someone else doing Humphrey Bogart.
And by the way, I'd like to know this. Since you did the Humphrey Bogart scene and the infamous line not infamous, I guess the famous line that came with it in terms of what Alice was making for dinner, I would like to know the longest stretch in your life that you have gone since then without someone referencing those two items that were for dinner.
I did get as far as Moscow at one point, and that was like, I don't know, 15 years ago. And I didn't hear it for that period of time. That was my 5 or 6 days, maybe, but I don't know what pork chops and applesauce sounds like in Russian. So maybe I was being asked to say it in Russian, but didn't know it. Probably 2-3 days. I mean, unless I'm not out of the house, because people don't have a tendency to get through on my cell phone to ask me to say pork chops and applesauce. In public, though, it is something that is asked. I was just away, on an event in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it was requested of me hourly.
By the way, can you do it real quick? We'll do it hourly. Can you do the voice in the Humphrey Bogart real quick for me?
I can try. Of course, it's a look, right? So
That's
you're
right.
going to miss the look. Just imagine my top lip, stretched across my teeth. Pork chops and applesauce.
There you go.
Well,
now I will have you know before we get into. I do have a racing question for you, but before we get into it, Christopher Knight, about the Brady Bunch and about also the Real Brady Bros, the podcast that you do with Barry Williams, who played Greg. I am so stoked to come to the Brady Bunch house. I'm not going to lie. I haven't slept actually since the middle of March. Okay. And because of this, so to go to the Brady Bunch house, I actually had custom made a t-shirt with a slogan that pays tribute to Peter Brady to wear while at the Brady Bunch house. I am so stoked for it. And I'm particularly proud of this. I did not put pork chops and applesauce on the t-shirt because I thought that'd be too obvious, right?
Oh, you didn't?
No, too obvious.
Right. So I'm curious what you placed on there. And mind you, this is a really unique thought that you had, but it's not, unfortunately, the first time someone has done this.
Okay.
Bringing custom clothes to their tour of the house.
Really? Okay. Now I thought about
Yeah.
one paying tribute to the Glee Club, but I didn't know if during the Glee Club you technically were at Westdale yet, or at Fillmore, or at like Clinton Preschool. Now, does this show you now the level of fanaticism I have for the program?
Well, yeah, but that was an important episode because that was before they discovered that I couldn't sing. They would even intimate that I was, singing at all. But that was the infamous Deacon Jones episode.
That is correct.
And I was a big fan of Deacon Jones at the time. I got to work with him. Like with the Joe Namath episode, I hardly got, I didn't get to work with Joe. It was, one massive group scene, I believe, at the end was the only scene that I appeared in with Joe Namath. And if you weren't in the scene, you probably weren't there if it was during school year because you were in school. So I remember not having much time with Joe Namath, but having significant amount of time getting my head slapped by Deacon Jones.
Okay, how about Don Drysdale? If I'm not mistaken, Don Drysdale was in an episode, was he not?
He was, and there was a scene between the boys and Don, but most of that show was also Barry's show.
Okay.
It was a Greg show, so he got to interact, and of course, Davy Jones. Maureen had Davy Jones, so all these people we get to meet, but we don't have as much interaction if you're not in the show and in the scene with that co-star as much as now I look back on it that I wish I had.
When
I did remember this though, when Joe Namath was on the show, you know, it was late in his career, and it was very clear that unless he was shot up or you know had a reason to move quickly, he moved gingerly. Like the knees were clearly sore, and I had a tendency to run. I had a lot of exuberance and jump on male members of the crew, and you know jump on their backs and just play like a monkey. And it was expressly told to me not to jump on Joe Namath.
They're like, Chris, he's only a Ram for 2 years. Take it easy on him, right? We're trying to get something out of the guy, right? He was
all
more
the
sick than.
That's going to happen by a Brady is going to be Florence. Florence is going to be jumping all over Joe Namath.
Hey, how did you end up? I mean, other than driving to Long Beach, I did find it interesting. You know, here we are in Indianapolis. I remember as a kid being thrilled at an episode where Indianapolis was referenced. Greg soups up the car that he bought, and he says, "These are the hottest wheels this side of Indianapolis." And is an Indianapolis kid that was such a thrill to see that referenced my city, right? I didn't realize that you guys had some, at least, taste or occasional venture into watching racing. Is that correct? And is that how you ended up at the Long Beach race?
I've always been a fan of racing. I mean, let's see, what were the things I wanted to be? An astronaut, race car driver, and you know, somebody that wore a lab coat and like a mad scientist. But definitely, I wanted right at the top of the list was race car driving, and so I was a fan of racing from being a kid living in LA. But my folks weren't necessarily, so I wasn't like around it because I wasn't around it as much as I wanted to be around it. Then meeting and knowing Michael Lookenland, whose father was a race fan, we would attend the Oval here at the time. God, what was it? Was Pomona? Was it Ontario?
Ontario, yeah, Ontario.
There was two different. Yeah, and I was a Peter Revson fan, and so going back to like 68, 69. You know, and then I think I was at the inaugural Long Beach Grand Prix. Was that 72? Might have been the next one.
75, I think. 74, 75 was.
75.
Yeah, I think somewhere in there. Yeah.
It was right near the damn near the first year I was taken in the Long Beach Grand Prix, and so happy to see that it's continued to be what it's become today. So yeah, I've always been a fan of Indy. I wasn't initially a fan of NASCAR. I didn't get into NASCAR until much later. Of course, that led me at the time to F1 early too. So I've always followed racing.
Have you ever been to the Indy 500?
I've not. I've been to the Brickyard 300, Brickyard 400.
Yeah, 400.
I've not been there for the Indy race. I've been to the track for the stock car race, but not the 500. Yeah, Florence is embedded in Indy lore and Indianapolis.
Oh,
I mean, she was a queen there. She was born, in right over the border there, Indiana.
Yeah, Dale, Indiana. Yep.
It's Dale, Indiana. So 12 miles from Santa Claus, Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that.
Yeah. your Indiana geography. That's impressive.
It's a place that my sister, out of all things, she lives in Nashville, and she wants to visit some Christmas time, Santa Claus, Indiana. And I hadn't, I was looking at it and realized, wait a second, this is around the corner from where Florence was raised or born. And it makes sense, that she'd been attending the Indy 500 and singing the, national anthem or God Bless America.
God Bless America,
whatever it was. Unfortunately, there was some talk about me actually going at one point when she was still alive to join her because we were both race fans, and that never happened, unfortunately. And I've got to take it in. I really do have to make it there. I always find myself, already having plans at that time of year, and I need to make certain it's a focused event. And I come to town for the entire week, I did spend, when the race was last year in California, when did they take that off the circuit? Was it like 5 years ago?
California Speedway would have been like 18, maybe, somewhere like 8 years ago, maybe, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So 8, 9, 10 years ago, I had the chance to be the passenger in the tandem car before the race, and Ari Leindijk was I believe my driver, and behind me was Mary Andretti driving somebody else, and they suit us up. They cinched down the helmet. I didn't pay much attention to it. I've ridden motorcycles. The old cinch style is pretty simple to get right, so I didn't pay attention to what they did. I got in the car. Pretty impressed with how low you are. You're going 170 miles an hour. They don't take it over that when you're in that tandem. But the helmet is getting sucked off my head, and it's undone.
Yeah.
And I'm panicked that I'm hoping this thing, I don't lose track of it, but I'm having a hard time really enjoying this event. All I can see is my helmet flying off and hitting Mary Andretti in the head, and then I'd be in the news the next day.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Now, and be honest.
Wait a second.
Do you think, and I'm curious of this, do you think if that happened, that the headline would say, Christopher Knight causes accident of racing legend, or would it say Peter Brady? Because with all due respect, do you find that people inadvertently still associate you with the character almost as much, if not more so, than the person?
Yes and no. I mean, maybe Chris has almost come to be equal to Peter over the years. Certainly early on, there was no Chris. It was only Peter. There's been enough years now to know that there's a person who stood beside Peter or was Peter. We're pretty synonymous. But the whole show and the character have transcended, their intent. It was a character in a creation intended to entertain, and it has become more than that. I mean, the whole family, the existence of Brady as a aspirational, quintessential American family is sort of an example of how families function best, and how a family that gets along and respects each other can laugh and be healthy. And there's a lot of desire for that. There's people still watching it after 60 years. They've worn out the entertainment of it. There's something else that's speaking to them from it. So when people reference Peter Brady, it's simply because they're referencing something more inherent in brother. At least that's what I believe it is. It's like, as a Brady, you're a member of everyone's family.
Which character?
Peter Brady killing Mary Andretti would be like a member of the family. Killed Mary Andretti.
And Andretti himself kind of is like everybody's at this point. Everybody feels in Indianapolis in particular. He's a beloved family member, so it makes sense, right? Which character? Exactly. Yeah. Christopher Knight is my guest, who played Peter Brady. Which character on the Brady Bunch most closely resembled the actor that was portraying them?
I think it was me. I mean, so everybody except for Mike and Mike played Bobby, were the youngest in their family. So that worked for Susan because she's playing the youngest in this family. But like Barry was the youngest in his family, playing the oldest. Maureen's the youngest in her family, playing the oldest. Eve was way younger than her, years younger than her sister, youngest in her family, playing middle. I was sort of middle. And so I'm the closest representation in real life to where Peter was structurally in the family. And Michael was in the middle of his family, playing the youngest. So for that reason, I'm sort of set up to perhaps know the position more directly, more completely. And so I really think when you're not really watching much acting when you're watching me. I mean, I was absolutely thrilled that the Peter character got to be the one that annoyed Marcia. You know, I mean, the idea of getting her money with a volcano is brilliant, right? Something that I had an entire special effects
Well,
department.
and you almost broke her
to help
nose, didn't you? Wasn't that? Didn't you?
And
You
then
sailed.
Peter's
Yeah.
right. Peter's breaking her nose.
How many times
Peter's
did you have to
breaking
throw
the
the football before you could hit Maureen McCormick square in the nose? There's no editing involved in that at all, right?
Well, it's funny. She wasn't anywhere near, because if you look at the scene, you know, here's Peter gonna, you know, I mean, the scene is that go out long and I'll throw a ball at you. Well, you know, director is directing it so that it makes, if you really watch it, little sense that Peter's throwing it as hard as he is, because there's no way that, you know, I think it was Bobby that was going out for the pass, would be anywhere near where the pass was thrown. Not only that, he's looking in one direction and Peter throws it in a completely different direction. Nonetheless, when they, you know, do a close-up of the Marcia character, it's a different setup, and now the ball has to fly in and hit her in the nose. And I wasn't initially invited to do that, and this would have been one of those points at which I would have been in school, because it wasn't my close-up. They didn't need me to be off camera. But I wanted to be there for her close-up, which is the ball hitting her in the nose, because it's sort of, that was the payoff, right? I needed to be there for that. And the prop man, who was trying his best, he was elected to be the person to throw the ball. I mean, it could have been anybody. And because the ball is a prop, I guess it was in his hands to throw it, and he couldn't get anywhere near her face. Right? Maybe because he was trying to be gentle. He was trying not to hurt her. And they invented, I guess, almost simultaneously, because it looked like it's the same substance that Nerf balls are made from. Although Nerf had just come out, it wasn't a Nerf ball. It was made by the special effects department out of something similar to a Nerf ball and painted brown. So it wasn't going to be something that was going to hurt her. It wasn't a real football in that close-up. And you don't notice it because it happens quickly. Nonetheless, now here's Maureen having a very difficult challenge, and that is that she's got to stand there and unsuspect a ball coming, flying and hitting her nose, which means she can't flinch before the ball gets there, and that's tough.
Right.
That's tough when you know it's coming, because it's coming right at your eyes, right? And she's, you know, she's very feminine and squeamish anyway. So, you know, that was the difficulty. Because it was so difficult for her, the ball had to be thrown many times.
Did you ever have a crush on Maureen McCormick, by the way? Are you every guy had a crush on Maureen McCormick,
I'm
Marsha
the
Brady?
irritating. No, I'm the irritating younger brother. That's the role I play, and that's the role I was. Maureen and I, because her mom couldn't drive, she had some issue with tunnel vision, so she wasn't equipped with a driver's license, and that's, you know, when you have a kid that's in show business, there has to be a parent. Firstly, to get them to the job or get them to the interview to begin with, and then to be their guardian while they're on set. Well, I don't know how they worked out as a family, how Maureen got to her interviews. Her dad, who was a teacher, probably had a schedule that allowed for it, because Maureen was going on interviews after school, just like her father would be, you know, as a teacher. That was his time off. So if she had an interview, he could take her. But if there was a job, mom was there. But she couldn't drive. Luckily, we didn't live far. So we drove them in. So it was me and my mom and Maureen and her mom driving in every day and driving home every day. That's an extra, 2 hours a day with Maureen. And she was sugar and spice and everything nice. And I was the boy version, everything for me was a matter. She was a girl and they were
This is
odd.
This is the 1968 lottery. You know that, right? Like for every guy in America, you hit the 1968 lottery and you're actually more worried about whether or not you're going to be able to see Joe Namath, right?
Well, I mean, literally, it's like you say it's the lottery, but imagine if you were born with a sister that everybody else considered the lottery. You wouldn't consider your sister the lottery.
Fair,
That's
okay,
how
fair.
close we were. But she was such a mark for me. And, it was such a joy for me to tease her. So, the ball in the face. Finally, I was there watching this go down, so they gave me the ball. I said, let me do it.
Okay. Can we do a little Brady Bunch fact or
zero it in
fiction?
on her nose.
Christopher Knight, my guest, he played Peter Brady on the Brady Bunch. Met him at Long Beach. Going to see him this weekend. Can we play a little Brady Bunch fact or fiction real quick? Fact or fiction, Hawaii was not as cool as going to Kings Island.
Fiction.
Okay. So Hawaii was better than Kings Island because of Vincent Price and Oliver, right?
I'm not sure whoever assumed that Kings Island was better than Hawaii. Kings Island was fun, but it wasn't Hawaii.
Okay. Fact or fiction, Cousin Oliver was a mistake character.
This would be an opinion. I don't think he was a mistake character. I think though that he was. He would have been called jumping the shark had a shark been jumped.
Okay.
But it hadn't been jumped at that point. So before there was a jumping of the shark was a reference to a Happy Days episode.
Of course.
But we all know what jumping the shark
So when
means
Fonzie
now.
jumped the shark, he actually was
Cousin
cousin Olivering it. Okay, I got that. I'm making the proper adjustments here.
Cousin Oliver would be a better way of saying jumping the shark.
Okay. All right.
It's like something that is out of place.
Fact or fiction, Phil Packer had no game whatsoever.
He certainly had more than Peter. He had no game. It was just an applied game. Yeah. It was,
yeah.
Very game.
Fact or fiction, Barry Williams and Florence Henderson were an item.
Fiction. He wanted them to be an item, but there was no item there. He still thinks they were, but that's okay. He can think what he will.
Of course, that's one of the things I'm sure that is discussed in the Real Brady Bros, that is the podcast about the Brady Bunch. All right, so, okay, fact or fiction, last one here. You have AstroTurf in your backyard.
Oh, it's the worst AstroTurf. It wasn't really AstroTurf. That mat they make? The little daisy in the corner you put by your back door. It scrapes off all the mud from your shoes because it's stiff plastic, like blades of grass. That's what the entire backyard was.
Wow. All right.
You fell down on that. It was like just being lacerated.
When you see scenes today,
It crunched on your feet.
If you're watching today, whether it be YouTube, whatever, if you see a scene from the Brady Bunch, and this is going to sound weird, but when you see it, Christopher Knight, and you see a Peter Brady scene, do you immediately in your mind recall the width of that room, and you're seeing the actual set and you're thinking about when that scene was created, or are you able to watch it as a TV show just like the rest of us?
I can now watch it like the rest of us, almost. I mean, there are some moments that are absolutely etched in my mind. And there's others I can't remember having done. Clearly, I'm there, so I am fully watching it objectively at that point. But no, it took a while to be able. That's why, in doing the podcast I do with Barry, the whole idea was to watch the show again because we haven't watched it in 50, 60 years, like literally since it was on Friday night, originally broadcast. And, it's not. I never watch my work, and I'm not unlike a lot of actors, but, it appears, it wasn't something also Barry wanted to consume. Barry doesn't avoid watching his work, but, he's not as an adult going to watch the Brady Bunch because he's a kid. It's like not going to entertain him. But I just simply, it's destructive to one's self-esteem to watch oneself. It's like looking in a mirror. It only could create bad tendencies in my case. So I don't watch myself, and I didn't. And then for 50 years, we hadn't watched the show, and an audience had. And clearly, we had lost touch with what it was that they were tethered to and enjoying. And that was the reason for doing the podcast. And I got to tell you, we learned a lot by doing it.
Did you ever resent it and then had to kind of reappreciate it, or have you always taken pride in it and embraced it?
Yes, I mean, resent is perhaps is too strong a term. I wanted to leave it behind, but I was very early guessing correctly that maybe it wouldn't go away, that it would always be there. And it's a classic glass half full thing, you know. And one could say, you know, by becoming so well known for something, that it can prevent you from being seen as appropriate for other things. And this might be true, the typecasting thing. But it is also the thing that gives you quite a lot, frankly. This brotherhood idea, because I'm a Brady, you know, it's a special place that people place me in their sphere. And that's a privilege and not one that many people get. So, you know, there might be some detriments, but there's also benefits, and one has to take stock of it all. And when I was in my 20s thinking that, all right, I'm going to leave this child show behind, and was recognizing the fact that it had already been rerunning now constantly, even before it was off Friday nights, it was already starting in syndication. It already had started in syndication. And, you know, 10 years later, you know, I'm 27 or so, and it looks like it's not going anywhere. It's going to stay there. And if it does, how am I going to outrun it? And why would I want to? So how to embrace it? I mean, I had a very, very strong experience. You know, at one point, you know, this is later. Now I'm in my 30s, so it's, you know, quite a bit later. It's 94 or so. There's the Real Live Brady Bunch, which was, I don't know if you took stock of it, but they mounted episodes on stage, literally transposed episodes on stage with different casts. And it was a theater production. And it became a giant hit. Traveled off Broadway and all around the country. When it came to LA, I was asked to go by the production. And this was at the period of time when I was expecting this thing was going to recede into the background. And I said, no, I don't want to be there. I don't need to be in an audience watching the show. No, it's not a place that I would believe I would be comfortable. You know, I'm trying to leave this behind, and this is just reminding me of it. I avoided it in Los Angeles. I am in the high-tech arena at this point. I'm going down to Australia, very first time, south of the equator. And Australia is about as far away from home as you could get, which is the first time you're that far away from home. It's kind of a unique kind of thought. You know, you've heard about water going down the drain backward, and you're a long way away from home. Though once you get there, other than people driving on the other side of the street, it seems like you are in LA still when you're, you know, in Sydney or Melbourne. Doesn't feel very much different than the United States down under. But I'm not even getting through, and I'm thinking I'm going down to Australia. I got a convention to do for the software company that we had started. And I'm staying with our distributor down there in their home, private residence. I don't even get through customs, and they're asking me if I'm there to see the show. And I don't even know what show they're talking about. And it's the Real Life Brady Bunch. It's premiering the very weekend that I'm there. I'm going to be in Australia for 5 days, and it's premiering on a Thursday night or Friday night of that very weekend that I'm there. And I'm thinking, this is a sign. I mean, maybe I shouldn't be running from this. Maybe there's a reason that this keeps cropping up in front of me, and maybe I should stop running. And I went, and it was a very warm, wonderful feeling that far away. It made the world very small, that I could be known halfway around the world and appreciated by people who had no business knowing me, but very much felt like they did.
Did you get royalties, by the way, like all the way through for all of maybe not the play show, but so Christopher Knight, when the Brady Bunch is airing in 1985 on TBS, you know, 3 times a day or whatever, were you guys still getting royalty from that?
For about 5 7 years after the show ended. Yeah, but we were under the contract that you're under is depicted by or determined by the time you were in front of the camera. So even though as an actor under SAG rules, I was under a different contract for any new work I would have done, any old work that I would have done is under the contract that was in play at the time we were in front of the cameras, at the time of principal photography. So though actors had literally, we ended in April, last show I think we produced April, March or April of 74. We were on strike that summer as actors, and by the end of that year, there was a new contract. The very first contract for actors, where reuse was the one of the gains the actors made that allowed an actor to make reuse in perpetuity, meaning forever. The contract I was under, which was one of the very first contracts that had reuse at all. Because 5 years earlier, if you were in front of a camera, you didn't get any reuse. You get nothing for the reruns. Because rerunning, that whole concept was something new. It was, relatively, brand new. So we were enjoying it for the first time. But now they recognize, wait a second, this stuff could run forever. And the contract that I was under was negotiated. So these actors get reuse for 10 runs per show in reuse. And then all rights revert back, so no more. So yeah, it took a while for all 117 episodes each to run 10 times. And as they did, they paid out. And they paid out in a descending kind of or tiered a diminished scale. So, X for, the first time it reran, half that X. The second time, quarter, went down to almost nothing. And then all rights revert back and no more reuse. So, yeah, it exhausted itself pretty quickly. The new contract, you'd get reduced down to a certain level, and then it would stay there and pay that in perpetuity.
Okay, I want you lastly here. I know that you're on your cell phone, but I texted you a photo of the T-shirt that I had custom made for my big visit to the Brady Bunch house this weekend when I'm going to be in the Long Beach race. If you could, please, I'd like for you to go ahead and take a look at that and then come back onto the phone and let me know what you think of my creativity. Are you looking at the T-shirt by chance?
I am going to ask you for a copy of that T-shirt. This is my new favorite T-shirt.
Yes, I love it.
Hinton Fight Club 70.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Buddy Hinton Fight Club, baby.
It needs to be like Buddy Hinton Fight Club, baby talk, baby talk.
That's right.
It's a wonder you can watch.
All right, here's the executive decision I've made. We need to get you to the Indy 500, and I know that you said that you have other things going on, but Peter Brady himself booked 2 dates in one night and was able to go back and forth and change clothes. You can do it as well. We've got to get you to I am now on a mission, Indianapolis 500, Christopher Knight here, 500 Festival Parade ahead of time, carrying on the legacy of Florence Henderson. That is my goal. I'm not going to make you come up and spot for me in turn 3 for the broadcast. You can just have your way with the race itself, but we are now hell-bent on getting you there, and I am super, super stoked. I'm not going to sleep between now and Saturday, and you're bound to follow through and getting me to the Brady Bunch house after qualifying.
Let me look into it. I need to be in Indy. You're right. I fit Indy.
That's
I should
right.
Be there.
That's right. All right, Saturday I'm going to see you.
And I want to fit into that T-shirt. I need a T-shirt.
All right. I'll hook you up with a T-shirt. I'll do it Saturday when we're at the Brady Bunch house, and I certainly appreciate it and look forward to it.
I'm coming with a black eye.
All right.
Saturday.
Christopher Knight, who portrayed Peter Brady. We'll see him on Saturday. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll reset everything, and we'll find out what John's got cooking in just a little bit as well. Hey there, Jake Query for Chicago's Pizza. Yes, you do not want pork chops and applesauce for dinner. I know that because you want Chicago's Pizza and the family meal deal. 2 medium, 1 topping pizzas and a fresh order of breadsticks, all for just $25 at Chicago's Pizza. 19 locations across the greater Indianapolis area, 26 statewide. And you're talking about pizza with a story in every slice. Folks that care about the community, but they also care about the pizza. I think I told you when I first partnered with Chicago, I went and I met with every owner and operator of all of the locations across the state. And they had such a pride because many of them started out just as an employee, worked their way up to ownership in the franchise for Chicago's, which started right here in central Indiana. The best pizza you can find in a variety, whether you like thin, whether you like deep dish, no matter. All of it available, Chicago's Pizza, chicagospizza.com.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Thanks again to Christopher Knight. I agree with J-Law. We got to get Christopher Knight to the 500. Absolutely need to get him there. Tony East, by the way, I wanted to get Tony on because I had a couple questions, and notably about the draft end as well with the Fever upcoming. And I know we ran long with Chris Knight, but I think Tony understands. Tony, you were or were not, I realize, a little out of your wheelhouse, certainly from an age standpoint. But at any point, Tony, did you watch the Brady Bunch?
I was prepared to come in and make a joke and say, I'm sorry, Greg Brady was unavailable for this segment. But you already got ahead of me on that.
Okay.
So when I was like less than 5, I think the only TV I ever actually had on was when my parents were watching shows. The only 2 I remember are Brady Bunch, and my dad liked the black and white Andy Griffith show.
It's a great show. Great show, Andy Griffith.
That's all I got.
Okay, let's get to this. First off, the NBA lottery. We now know the Pacers, and correct me here if I'm wrong. The Pacers can only hold on to their pick if it's within the top 4, and then, of course, they could have if they slid 10 or beyond. They cannot fall that far outside of the top 10, right? So it is basically top 4 pick or guaranteed that pick goes to the Clippers, correct?
That's exactly right. 52% chance it ends up in the top 4, 48% chance it's either 5 or 6, and those last 2 would be the 2 that go to the Clippers.
Okay. And we also found out that the Clippers themselves, they're really hoping that they get that pick because their actually owned pick is going to Oklahoma City, correct?
Yeah, they traded that pick to the Thunder for Paul George a long time ago. I think this is their last outright pick that they send out in that trade, but now there's like a 9% chance the Thunder get a top 4 pick, which is crazy. And ironically, the Clippers want that to happen because if that happens, that would knock down the chances of the Pacers moving into the top 4. What a weird conundrum that is.
Okay. So that's where things stand with the Pacers and with the playoffs. If you had to say right now, Tony, who is the favorite in the East?
My favorite is Boston. I think they've looked Tatum being back and playing pretty well just gives them the highest ceiling of any team to me. We haven't seen this version of them in this postseason, right, without Drew Holiday or without Kristaps Porzingis. And they've had 2 very, very strange, got upset series against the Knicks last year and the Heat 3 years ago. So I don't know if they've earned the right to just say they're going to waltz through as the highest ceiling team, but the Pistons haven't beat anybody in the playoffs yet, so I'm going Boston barely over Detroit, even though they're probably pretty close.
Okay, Western Conference, who do you say?
I don't know. Do I have to give an explanation for picking the Thunder? Is there any?
Well, I mean, San Antonio, I guess, just because if he gets on a heater, he's unstoppable, right?
Can I tell you that I think if your goal was to split the Thunder into the two best separate teams possible, I think both of them would have got a home court advantage in the West.
That's fair. I mean, it's hard to argue that, right?
They're loaded, and they were hurt all year, and they still steamrolled half the league. It was unbelievable.
They had 74 lottery picks over a 5-year stretch, and it's starting to show that, right?
Yeah, it was possible for a moment that the Clippers lost. That happened. If the Sixers had not made it to the playoffs last night, and the Jazz had some like insane situation where they lose a coin flip and drop to 8, that the Thunder could have had 3 lottery picks this year. It looks like it's only going to be 1 now, but 3 it was possible, and still technically 2 could be. It's crazy.
Now, I asked this question the other day, and I'm going to bring you in, Tony, and I did it not because it's just a random brain dropping from me, which I'm known to do, but there was a reason because I thought it was a point that could be illustrated. You may have heard this when I was talking about it, but if the NBA draft was the exact same in the order, but they said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to redraft the entire league. Every player's a free agent, and we're going to go 15 rounds and redraft the entire league.
Okay.
In the opinion of Tony East, I would like to know who you believe would be the top 3 players selected. And then I also would like to know if this year's number 1 overall pick is a player, and I'm using air quotes, that you can select, where would that fall in this hypothetical draft?
So not Cooper Flagg, the undrafted to be determined 2026 number 1 pick, to be clear. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. This year, so every player in the draft every player in the NBA is currently available. If you want to select Jason Tatum first overall, you can. Or you can say, actually, I'm going to take the right to pick the 2026 first round pick.
Yeah, you never know with rookies, right? Like Flagg was really good, but even some guys who were thought to be awesome, you just never know if they're going to be superstar awesome or just merely pretty good or how that's going to shake out. So I would imagine they would be in the 10 to 20 range, anyone that could go number 1 this year, even with their very high perception of all of their ceilings. Like I think Wembanyama is the number 1 pick for every team because you in theory give yourself the longest shelf life to be awesome, even though both Shea and Jokic give you like an immediate, you could win the championship right now kind of deal. After those 3, you could debate lots of guys, Luka, Tatum, etc. It's hard. It's just so hard with rookies because you never know. Like last year when people were ranking the top 100 players in the league, I thought Cooper Flagg was a hard one because the way he played this year, he was probably the 50 to 60th best player, which is exceptional for an 18-year-old, to be clear. But you don't know. Like he could come in and be just kind of okay.
So who do you think would be the top 3 in this hypothetical? Now, keep in mind, you're taking on the player at this age right now with the amount of time they have left in their career, their contract, everything else. So everything stays the same. Who are the top 3 that would be selected?
I still think it's just the top 3 players in the league. Maybe I'm underrating or overrating maybe the chance to win a title like immediately, but I think it would be Wemby, Shea, Jokic, 1, 2, 3, unless a team was really set on like, okay, we want a really long window of being really good, and then maybe they would lean towards someone like Cade, who's younger but exceptional, for example. But the chance to have like the dude who can win, like him alone can win you any series is so valuable.
So I think
to your point about this draft, though, there could be multiple of those.
I say, and maybe I'm alone in this, although I asked a couple people that would know better than I, and they tended to agree. I think Cooper Flagg does not go lower than 5 in that scenario because he's 19.
Really?
Yeah. Because he's 19. What's that?
But he's not like as good as Cade or Anthony Edwards, who's 23, or Tatum, or any of those guys who are all young and exceptional also.
I think he's pretty good. I mean, maybe I'm just...
He is pretty good, to be clear.
I mean, he's versatile, and once he figured it out, he got up to a slow start, I'll give you that. But the last month of the year, did you see his numbers? I mean, it was unbelievable what he was doing. And he's doing double teams.
Right after the ESPN straw poll that said that all the voters were leaning towards Con Knippel for Rookie of the Year, Flagg was exceptional, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 50 and 46 on back-to-back nights. I'm like, holy cow, man. But I think just based on age, they are so unique. All right, lastly, Tony, Fever, draft recap, and your thoughts on that roster heading in now as they're right on the verge of it.
Yeah, you can see their pivot to, Kelly talked to you about this yesterday, like being a little bit more cognizant about their guard depth after they went into last year with Mitchell and Clark and Sidney Colson, and then not really a ton more on the ball handling front. And then throughout the season, they had to sign just a million players to contracts at various times to field a guard rotation. Aaron McDonald obviously came in, Odyssey Sims at some point. Like, they just kept adding guards to field a team that actually made sense. And so with that happening, and Clark and Mitchell both dealing with injuries, and Kelsey Mitchell's injury, by the way, she said at her exit interview that it was, in her opinion, an overuse injury, right? So if you have all of that being factors, you need to enter the year with more guard depth, and they did that. They have a veteran in Walker Kimbrough. They got a rookie in the draft in Raven Johnson, and Ty Harris is a great fit next to either Mitchell or Clark. So I think that makes good sense as a shift tactically from your team to kind of cover for your injuries last year. And every other position group looks close to the same as it did to start the year, maybe a little lighter in the front court. I think they could use one more wing, but they're kind of out of spots to add at this stage. But I think given how their year ended and what they would have needed to be just a smidge better at any point, that's how close they were to making the finals. I do understand their pivot and why they did the things that they did.
Tony, East Forbes, Locked on Pacers as well. Appreciate it on short notice today, Tony, and appreciate you letting Peter Brady carry a little of that time, and we certainly will talk to you soon, all right?
I'm sure you had a great time with that, Jake. That's exciting.
It was cool. It was cool. I appreciate it. Tony East joining us on the show. John's here. We'll catch up with him, find out what he's got going on, and we'll do it next. Hey there, Jake Quarry for Surfside. Look for the can with the sunset stripes. Surfside now, not only with their Aid beverage in multiple flavors, but of course, iced tea with a splash of vodka, lemonade with a splash of vodka, and all of it with no carbonation, so so smooth and easy to enjoy no matter what the situation in this fabulous weather. Surfside, look for the can with the sunset stripes. Please be 21 and please consume responsibly. Hey there, Jake Quarry for Game Day Men's Health. GameDayMen'sHealth.com is the website. Clinics in the Indy metro area include Avon, Carmel, Fishers, and Greenwood. I love the Carmel location, by the way, for Game Day Men's Health. A number of different therapies for you guys if you just feel like getting back in the game. Maybe you just look down, you got that stubborn belly fat. Maybe you think to yourself, man, I'm just getting tired throughout the course of the day. I want to, or I've been running a little bit, but my ligaments, they're just sore afterwards. Peptide therapy, which now can be taken orally, that is a game changer right there. That's available. Of course, testosterone therapy, weight loss therapy, all of it available from Game Day Men's Health, and all of it done with FDA-approved pharmacies. Efficient, clean, friendly, all of it right there at Game Day Men's Health. They would love to talk to you about what they can do for you. Make an appointment, a consultation appointment at GameDayMen'sHealth.com. That's GameDayMen'sHealth.com.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
We'll find out what J&V's got going on as part of the crossover, brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air, an official Heil Heating and Cooling dealer. 317-353-2141, the telephone number for Love Heating and Air. Tomorrow, and again, I'm always hesitant to do this. There's, with me, I always feel uncomfortable taking days off. I don't know why, but I just do. But my flight got moved up tomorrow to the point where I would have been able to do the show, but it would have been like an hour and a half or something like that before I would have had to take off. So Rake will be in for me tomorrow, and then I'm on my way to Long Beach. It is an event that I absolutely love. But there will still be a Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday tomorrow. Really good story from a woman here who turned tragedy into help of other people. I'll get into that tomorrow at 2:30. So I will be on the show for that, but the rest of the show, Greg will be doing it tomorrow. J&V has arrived. John, what's on the big program today?
We're going to go into the whole IU situation with the transfer portal, which is a big win. The transfer portal now is a part of winning. You don't get to hang any banner or put on any rings, but it's a part of winning, and we'll go over that, which in the past couple of days has been really nice. And I'm going to try to figure out, if you brought this up earlier, if Foster the People, if they were good because Pumped Up Kicks was a hit song, or if it were bad for them because Pumped Up Kicks was a good song. Because they're great in concert, but I think the darkness of that song, I kind of wonder if it ever really hampered their growth and sustainability.
I remember, and I'm not going to say which school it was, but I remember when that song, shortly after it came out, there was a big school shooting that was in the news, and there were radio stations that took it off for a while there, right?
There are a handful of songs that stations will take off in situations.
I'm kind of surprised
like that.
Jeremy was never one of those.
And there was one back in the early 2000s called Bodies, by the Drowning Pool, and all the alternative stations took that off for a long time too.
Remember Louie by the Kingsmen, going way back, by the way?
Yeah.
Not for that kind of a dark thing, but there's always been great debate as to what it was that they actually say in one of the
The point I was making, too, is I saw Foster the People at the Mirai once, and I thought they were really good. And I just always wondered why they never hit it bigger than what they did.
They kind of hit like the Soul Asylum level of fame.
Well, they were like, I think to me they were kind of cool, like the Black Keys, but they never did rise to the level of the Black Keys.
That may be it. I mean, that song became just so, you know what I mean?
I always wondered about that situation, and I always look at stuff like I'm not there to examine lifestyles or anything like that or music. I'm there to listen to the music and either you enjoy it or you don't, and you move on. I've always kind of viewed it like that, but yeah, it's a tough call in some circles.
IU big news transfer portal. John will break it all down for everybody upcoming. My thanks to everybody for tuning in. Stephanie White for joining me, Tony East, and, of course, Christopher Knight, a.k.a. Peter Brady. I'm back with you on Tuesday because I come back late on Monday. So Greg and Will Haskett will carry it home. But I thank you for listening now and for those days as well. It's Aquarian Company.